System Steering Group plenary meeting. First, an announcement. We, as usual for our plenary meetings, are recording the meeting today, so you should be aware that this meeting is being recorded. If you plan to speak and don't want to be recorded, you should probably plan not to speak. Speaking of speaking, if you have called in as a participant and you're not one of the regularly scheduled speakers, your line is muted. If you want to say something to the audience in the audio channel, please send a chat to Laura Barman, and Laura will give you directions for joining the audio portion of the conference. Otherwise, you can also use the chat facility to send comments to us in the box at the bottom of your screen. If you'd like to be recognized for something, you can use the mechanism of raising your hand. You'll see in the lower left hand of your screen a little blue man icon. If you click on the up arrow next to it, you can you'll see that you get 4 icons, one of which is a little blue man with his hand raised, and you can use the hand-raising mechanism to draw attention to yourself. Documents for the meeting that has already taken place the last 2 days and today's meeting can be found in the documents link at the lower right-hand side of your meeting. So our agenda this morning will be first a series of committee report outs from the meetings yesterday. We have 2 hours allocated for that business. Then at noon Eastern Time, we will have an hour session for new business, following which we will have a closing wrap-up and next steps for the January plenary, and we will also have the mildly delayed address by Jeremy Grant, the chair of the head of the NPO at NIST, who wasn't able to join us on Wednesday because the government was still closed. So without much further ado, let's proceed to the committee report outs. And the first committee report out is going to be from the ad hoc group on taxonomy and the functional model work. And for that, we're joined by Adam Madlin. Adam, are you in the audio channel?
I am here, Bob. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Very good this morning.
That's good. Okay, well, take it away.
Okay, well, thank you, everybody. I have the honor of being the first presenter this morning, and I am going to provide an update on 2 separate groups that I am currently facilitating, the Taxonomy Ad Hoc Group and the Functional Model Effort, which is being led by the Security Committee. In case you don't know, I am the chairman of the Security Committee, and if we could go to the next slide. I have a very brief report out this morning. So I would like to just provide an update on the Taxonomy Ad Hoc Group effort. We continue to meet weekly and have continued very good progress. And I do want to report that the Taxonomy Ad Hoc Group has officially submitted its first deliverable, which we call the IDSG Glossary Release 1, into the process to be formally adopted by the IDSG. And as part of that process, it is our initial release. It includes our first 6 terms, but so it's a fairly small contribution to start, but still we believe very significant. It has validated the process. We've adopted a format for our IDSG glossary. We have a active wiki, and in part of that process, it has been submitted to and approved by the Standards Committee. So it now has the support and representation of the Standards Committee, who sponsored this effort. And it has been formally submitted to the Privacy Committee for their privacy evaluation. That was approximately 3 weeks back, and the Privacy Committee has provided to the ad hoc group its first preliminary feedback and has been formally presented to the Taxonomy Ad Hoc Group, and we are now in the process of evaluating that feedback and responding to it. So we do expect that upon addressing the feedback we received from the Privacy Committee, we expect to be able to resolve address some feedback that we received that was needed to be addressed from the Privacy Committee. We will, after that, be shortly thereafter submitting it to the IDSG for full adoption. That is our intention, and hope to accomplish that within the next month. We have also, so this glossary work was completed a little more than a month ago, and then proceeded through documentation and the submission process. In the meantime, we've continued on in what for now I'm calling our Release 2. And as part of Release 2 of the taxonomy effort, we decided to adopt a new process, implement a new process. It was to better leverage offline input. And it's still a work in process, I will admit that. But what we attempted to do is to address a much larger group of terms in a more effective way. And so we have submitted, there have been 18 additional terms that are actively in discussion by the Taxonomy Ad Hoc Group, 13 of which we believe the Ad Hoc Group has completed its deliberations on. So it is conceivable that in the next several months, hopefully before the next plenary, that we will have the next draft into the process for adoption to the plenary. So I just want to report that the Taxonomy Ad Hoc Group has continued to make significant contributions, put a significant amount of time in to this effort, and is resulting in what I believe is very good progress. The other final note I would like to make on our efforts is that for any of you who are aware of the work we're doing, whether you're participating directly or hear about it, it's pretty challenging work going through all the details and implications. And part of what we do is continue to evaluate the goals we are shooting for and how we approach our work and the processes. So we are always evaluating that, and in fact, stepping back a little bit and evaluating a few aspects of what we're doing at present. So I just want to report the good news coming out of the Taxonomy Ad Hoc Group, and that's what I wanted to share on the taxonomy work. I guess I'll take questions at the end of my session. The next report out, and if we could go to the next slide, please, is related to a new chunk of work that started just several months ago. The Security Committee has taken ownership for the functional model design work or definition work, and we have elected to pursue it directly within the Security Committee meetings. So it is, and at that time have also invited any participation. But it is in the regular weekly Security Committee meetings that we are pursuing this functional model work. We've been hard at it on every session weekly for approximately the past 8 weeks, and I feel, though it's foundational, it's all preliminary work, we are making good work, good progress. We've spent some effort in defining our objectives, and the purpose of our work is to define the functional elements of the identity ecosystems which can be combined to implement identified and sustainable IDSG use cases. And as part of that, we have documented a draft terms of reference, which is located on the functional model file depot, and that is actually something we just completed this week. So it is still draft, meaning there are still some reviews going on, but it is in a position where anybody can review it and get access to it. So we view this work of the functional model effort as foundational to a lot of the work of the IDSG. Particularly, it's a key deliverable that we believe is required to move forward with the NSTIC interim identity ecosystem. And there'll be more conversation on that topic, I believe. So where we are more specifically, we have spent the last number of weeks drafting a conceptual model with a lot of contribution from a number of individuals, and that this conceptual model, which is sort of the kickoff point for our functional model work, is on the wiki, and if you download this file, which is on the File Depot, you can get the link. It's a long link, so I elected to put it in that format. Part of what we're doing is very actively coordinating with the trust with other key contributory committees. We interact at a leadership level and at a group level as frequently as is appropriate. For example, we had a large joint committee meeting yesterday with some presentations with contributory materials to the work effort overall. And we are currently defining key deliverables to shoot for in the January plenary. So it is our hope that we will be able to provide a more significant presentation in the January plenary in person about related to key deliverables and status of the functional model that we're working on. So that's what I wanted to update everybody on this morning, today, and I'm not sure if we're taking questions right now or holding them off to the end of the section.
I think we can take questions right now from anybody who has questions. So the first question, Adam, I think should be if anyone wants to join the work of the functional model group, what should they do? When will the meetings take place, and who do they get in touch with?
Thank you for that question. That's great, because we are always looking for more participation, and it is absolutely open to anyone. We do meet weekly. That is every Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. There is also a listserv called Functional Model that you can join, and which would be strongly recommended to join, in which all communications and all email threads are sent to. There is a functional model wiki, which is just starting to be utilized, and so I would encourage everybody to follow that as well. The functional model meetings are labeled as Security Committee and are on the IDSG event calendar every Thursday, 2 p.m. Eastern, for 1 hour.
And people who have further questions can contact you?
Absolutely. Directly.
Okay. So is there anybody, let's see, I'm not seeing anything in the chat window at the moment. Is there anybody on the web channel who would like to ask a question in the audio channel? If so, please send Laura Barman a chat and or raise your little blue man's hand so that I can tell that you're in the queue. Must be early in the morning. Thanks very much, Adam. And with
Thank you, Bob.
With that, I think we can move on to the next presentation. Okay, so I think this may be only the second report out from our TFTM committee. This is the sort of super committee that was formed recently, which includes trust frameworks and trust marks, and also several other committees that have been folded into the activity. So I actually can't remember who is giving the TFTM update this morning. So who's on for the TFTM update?
It should be Andrew.
Okay, Andrew Hughes. Andrew, are you in the audio channel? Andrew, if you are in the audio channel, you are on mute. I see Andrew typing.
Oh, that's what happens for.
Okay, there you go.
Okay.
Good morning, Andrew. Welcome, and take it away.
Thanks. And Bob, I do agree with you that they are a super group of people that have joined the TFTM. Thank you. Sorry, I just have to turn off the air conditioning here. So, the Trust Framework, Trustmark, and Legal Committee had a committee breakout yesterday. We had 90 minutes to work with, so we elected to try to work directly on the deliverables that we have in front of us. For those of you that are not aware, the TFTM has set up a very high-level and lightweight work plan, including several streams of work that we feel will have to be addressed as we move forward. Things like defining or characterizing the ID ecosystem, things like getting more clarity and joint input from the other committees on what the identity ecosystem framework will be, Trustmark programs, acceptance criteria, all those nasty details that still have to be worked on. The idea is to try to get a sense of the length of time, amount of work, amount of effort that we're facing, so we can start to include that in our overall planning for the plenary. But at the beginning, what we're doing is working on the first work stream. I posted a link into the chat, which points at our work plan space, and in there you can look around for the overall work plan and the work stream 1 work plan. Work stream 1 is concerned with establishing this idea of an interim identity ecosystem, and the only definition that we're certain of about interim is that it's somewhere between where we are today and somewhere between where we are today and where we will finally end up with this identity ecosystem. We're trying to encourage rich conversation and discussion on our working calls, which have now switched to weekly, so that we can hear the ideas, figure out where disconnects might be, and line up concepts so that we can get a better idea of what an interim state might look like. So what we worked on yesterday was continued discussion of the survey development, which Jack Seuss is leading. And you can see the slide. It's a very quick and dirty survey in its first round to get some broad characteristics. There we go. Broad characteristics of the identity participants that are out there. As you know, there's work to be done on sampling parameters. How do we do correct sample sizes? We will not be doing a fully global, every single person on the planet kind of survey. That's not appropriate. But we also want to make sure we don't target it too narrowly, because if we get the answer we expect with no surprises, we haven't designed the survey or the sampling parameters correctly. We know that. So Jack has got a small team of volunteers on his sub-team. Details are on the TFTM wiki. The link is in the chat window. Most of the discussion yesterday was, Jack has put together a starter list of focus questions. And he's organized them by the various types of participants: trust framework providers, identity providers, relying party / service providers, and so on. There's reasonably specific questions to ask of each of the groups. So he's broken them up that way. The idea of the focus questions is trying to ask the understandable but concise questions that can be answered and are likely to be answered by those companies and individuals. Most of the discussion centered on the time frame pressures, a very aggressive time frame. We are hopeful that we can finish a very early round and get some early responses by the January plenary, so we get a sense of where we're going with the survey and what kind of information we're getting back. Very tough timing because of the holiday seasons that are coming up. And we had a couple of volunteers add themselves to the sub-team, which is great. If you like surveys, if you would like to shape the way we ask, the plenary itself, first of all, and also the broader identity community to identify themselves to us, please join Jack and his sub-team. But like I said, this is going to be an ongoing effort, we believe, because the data that comes back should be of use to all of the committees and the entire plenary. Next slide, please. So the remainder of the meeting was working on this idea of the interim identity ecosystem. We're working on an approach paper on how we would go about establishing an interim identity ecosystem. What do we need to see? What do we need to have? Who should be included in the early adoption? How do we reuse and be efficient at what we do? Now, of course, to decide on several different approaches and pick and choose between them, if there are several reasonable ones that look plausible, we have to start by defining what we kind of mean by interim identity ecosystem. So if it's a state somewhere between here and there, in the longer term solution, where do we want to be? Is it bounded by time? So within 6 months we need to do this. Is it bounded by the types of part? Oh. Don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, Deb can't. Yeah, I'm on a hotel Skype through Hardline, so hopefully it's okay. Anyways, the two major portions of the approach paper. Actually, I think next slide, please. Okay, yeah, the two parts of the approach paper are first to try to figure out a plausible interim ID ecosystem, and you can see the slide. You know, Rome was not built in a day. We all agree on that. And you know, personally, I feel that there is an interim state, like a good several staging points through the evolution of the identity ecosystem and IDSG work, where we can maybe take a pause, you know, take a look at the direction we're going. But there will be completion points along the way, and that's what we're trying to articulate. So one of the concepts of this is I have a general sense that we're not quite agreed on which direction to head in to get to a final state or a long-term state. So part of this interim discussion is, can we describe a general direction to head in? You know, are we going to a full commercial pay-for-everything model ecosystem? Are we going to a fully free, self-funded ecosystem? I'm not talking about the IDSG itself. Are we servicing any types of online services preferentially? You know, these are questions we don't have answers to yet. And through our rich discussions in these committee meetings, we're having some of this stuff surfaced, and good discussions and debates are going on. Nothing settled yet. So please don't believe that we've come to any conclusions yet. Trying to ask provoking questions and hear the various opinions around the room is the important thing that we're doing right now. Next slide, please. Okay, so a lot of great high-level words there. On this slide, what I've got is just some of the questions that I was starting to mention. Yesterday, I prepared 7 topic areas that I was optimistic we could talk about maybe half of them. Some of the areas that we discussed were things like what must be in place for us to agree that there is an interim NSTIC ID ecosystem, and we decided that labeling it NSTIC ID ecosystem was not a good idea at this point, if ever. We can discuss that later. Another area is, given that there's an existing identity ecosystem today, what parts of it should be brought into an interim identity ecosystem? So given that we know people are operating now in the world and successfully in the world, are there any parts that we can quickly adopt? And how would we do that is the follow-on question. How do we determine if someone who wants to be an early adopter should be in or out of that first interim state? And then the other questions we didn't actually get into, but there are other questions that I hope are provoking thoughtful consideration. These slides will be edited and filled out with more of the discussion material that is from the notes, and we'll post them on the TFTM wiki for further discussion. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay, so so some of the opinions that were surfaced, and please, Bob and Kate, just let me know if I'm going on too long here.
No, you're fine.
I'm having a 7:30 a.m. Pacific slow day, even though I'm on the East Coast now.
Okay, you're fine. Go ahead.
I've pre-shifted to the other time zone. How's that? So some of the opinions that were aired, and I for the people that were at the meeting, I hope I'm capturing these okay. If I'm not, please let me know. It's hard to take notes and speak at the same time, so please help me out if I've just got it totally wrong, or even partly wrong. So some opinions. The 4 principles could set the minimum bar for this idea of being included as an early adopter. We could build out simple requirements, simple criteria from that, and maybe even accept self-attestation in the early days. It's a great way to on-ramp and start small and grow bigger. The idea of a field guide. So a field guide is if you go bird watching, you take your field guide with you, and it describes the characteristics of the birds that you see in a way that you can find them. So what kinds of food do they like to eat? How big are they? What does their call sound like? Consider the field guide idea for identity solutions. Now, you might imagine that the survey design will be will help build that field guide pretty quickly. So they're going hand in hand. We're surveying at the high level so that we can identify and find and have people have identity solutions self-identify. And the end result should be a way of finding aids, right? So if we encounter an identity solution, it will be a way of us deciding if it is actually an identity solution that we think is an identity solution. I know that's circular and tough to take early in the morning, but I hope that we end up finding identity solutions that we've never expected and are novel and do things in different ways. And this is one of the tools that would help us to understand how they work and the bits they have or don't have. So that's that one. The idea of encouraging behaviors of the participants in an ecosystem. So instead of looking for hard criteria which you must meet, how far down the road of guidance and practice guides do we go? Do we say, you must do this, you can't or shouldn't or will not do that if you want to stay within the ecosystem? Next slide, please. And I must admit, the behavioral aspects, I never considered that before, so it was a very good piece of discussion. Colin Wallace says in the chat, field guide, is it for end users as well as for IDSG's needs? In the beginning, Jack Seuss and I hope others in the room share the idea that the field guide will begin as a way to interact for IDSG to interact with the identity communities out there. So it will have a way of talking and a way of, it'll encapsulate some of the concepts that we come up with on what an identity ecosystem is and the characteristics of. It may evolve into other forms later on, but the initial thought is, how can we find these identity solutions and ecosystems and trust frameworks and describe them in a way that is processable by IDSG? That's what the idea behind that is. So, other opinions from yesterday's meeting. Identity ecosystem exists today, so very important to nurture, support, and guide rather than define, certify, regulate. So that's a very strong and shared opinion, I believe. Sort of in the 70 to 75% that we should support and guide rather than regulate, I think. Quite a bit of discussion about designing incentives into whatever we come up with and be careful about it so that we attract partners. We've heard some discussion about why would a commercial entity ever want to come anywhere near an IDSG thing? Well, if it lowers their risk, gives them some insurance or warranty, pays them in some way, if there are payment models that don't cost us anything, but through efficiencies gained between supplier and customer, perhaps, they can save money or pay themselves, sort of thing. We had a bit of a discussion of that in the follow-on meeting, so we'll talk about it in a little bit. And caution was urged on explicit and hard trustmark programs. We probably don't need a rigorous one today, but if we can't come up with clear benefits and value and a reason for having one, then we have to seriously consider not having one, or use the benefit and value discussion to decide the nature of the trustmark program. My personal belief is that we need a way to figure out if someone is, lightly endorsed, stamped with the seal of approval, whatever it ends up being. We have to have some way of saying that it is acknowledged as a fair actor, a good player, name your term here, in the ecosystem. Is it actually a trustmark program? Does it have auditors and assessors and criteria? I don't know. But I would suspect that experience from our existing trust framework provider partners will help us have that discussion and understand the real business risks of overloading people that haven't been onboarded yet with regulation. So anyways, next slide, please. Okay. Question from Colin Wallace on the chats. Yes, so the question is, does the IDSG approval mechanism use the other trustmark-like programs and trustmark programs directly? Yes, in some way. We just perhaps don't know exactly what way yet. but making participants go through a bazillion approvals and certifications and assessments is not a way to build a market and build an ecosystem. If they have a choice to not do that, it's likely they won't. So next steps, continue to focus on the first two deliverables. I think we're about as fully engaged and maxed out as we can at the moment with with all the time commitments and everything. We've decided to change the timing and structure of the Trust Framework, Trustmark committee meetings. We shifted to a weekly meeting. Wednesdays, the notices will go out, and we're going to do 2 one-hour sessions in that 2-hour block on Wednesdays, so that we can do 2 deliverables in any given week. We can have people working on them, and in case you're working on the 2 deliverables on the table at the moment, you'll be able to work on both. Because unfortunately, what we find is that people volunteer for related and very interesting deliverables that are of interest to them. So we're trying to make sure that the people that are stepping up their commitment to more than one activity are actually able to participate. This is an open call for anyone in the plenary to join up in the Trust Framework Trustmark committee for work on these deliverables. You can see the terms of reference for each of the identified deliverables that we have decided on for the first stream. It's all in the TFTM wiki. We're trying to take a very structured approach to this work in that before any work begins, we define what it is, what the point of it is, when we expect it to come back to committee for further discussion, who's going to work on it, who's accountable for getting it done, and what group would be able to pick it up on day one after publishing and immediately use it for something, right? So our intent is that if we can't fill out 6, 7 fields that describe the work we're about to get into, especially the one about will anyone be able to use this or want to use the output, then perhaps we shouldn't be doing the work. So take a look if you get a chance to see how we've described it. The idea is that we want to start work on a deliverable, finish it, get on to the next one. So we're trying to make them reasonably small to get velocity and momentum going. Okay. I think that's my last slide, but I just realized I should speak about the Joint Committee. Is that right, Kate? Or Laura?
Yes, that's your last slide.
Okay. So later on in the afternoon yesterday, we had and please start organizing for questions if you would like to ask any questions on the previous material. Later on in the afternoon, we had a joint committee meeting, and it would probably be easier to list the committees that were not invited to the joint meeting. There was a little bit of overlap with, I think, health was unable to join, and business plan was unable to join. What we decided to do during the course of the planning and the day is Ken Klingenstein offered to give us a quick overview and walkthrough of the periodic table of trust elements that they've been working on in Internet 2 and the NSIG pilot. And I asked Dave Cox to put together some material on some of the ways that a trust framework and the members of a trust framework could succeed financially, pay themselves back, that sort of thing. Some interesting ideas coming out of the AXN pilot. And then Dazza Greenwood presented on a tool and a way of capturing some of the structure of the identity ecosystem framework based on the work that's the output and deliverables that the committees are planning. and based on some of the work from MIT Media Lab. The idea with that session, the overall session, was give people more material to think about and alternative ideas, so that as we have the discussions about, what is this identity ecosystem and what is it not, we can try to engage a variety of points of view of people in the room. Now, I know that's not everything, it's not all, but it's my hope is that by having these smaller pieces of presentation, it adds fuel to the thinking machines and allows us to look outside of our current knowledge and our experience with certain models and ways of doing, and see if there are hybrid ways, or can we do things in a sequence that makes it that is smart and gets us to a positive outcome without everyone getting an ulcer, or sorry, 2 ulcers. Material will go up. We have some slides from Ken Klingenstein, who is also looking for feedback on that work. Sorry, maybe I'll describe it a little bit. The periodic table of trust elements, a very interesting concept. It's organized row-wise, so each of the interactions within Federation participants, so a Federation operator to a identity provider, or a service provider relying party to an identity provider, and then so on. Each of those relationships has certain elements, agreements, things that should be in place, things that you might want to document in your agreements, depending on what you're trying to achieve. So for each of those relationships, Ken's team has listed out all of the things that you probably want to have in an agreement. But depending on which model you're using, or how you want to structure your federation, you would only pick the ones that are actually applicable to your use. So, for example, the in common model and operating model, it's very important to know how the keys are generated and stored. So they're very explicit about that in their agreements and contracts. Whereas in other federations, it may not be as it may be acceptable for an assessor to attest to the strength rather than have the specific strength required stated in the agreement, that sort of thing. And the idea is that you can pick and choose. So you pick off the menu of the various trust elements that you would want to see and use that to guide the development of the agreements within the federation or community. So it's very it's thought-provoking and interesting work. That's about it, I think, for me. Happy to take questions. And also, we're quite active on our wiki site, so I posted that link. And we're trying to keep all of our work and all the preliminary work and the work towards the work and the plans and all that fully exposed to anyone who wants to look at it. So if you're trying to get a sense of where we're at, so you're trying to coordinate and make sure that we're not stepping on other people's initiatives, it's on the wiki, and there isn't any other material, any other planning material anywhere else. It's all on the wiki. So any questions so far?
So let me ask you a couple of questions and see whether anyone else has any. So Laura has just added the conceptual model draft into the document repository, which gives me the opportunity to call attention to the fact that it's there, and also to ask you, how that model relates to the initial framework work that you've been doing.
What I'm calling an identity ecosystem conceptual model is my attempt to draw a higher order, higher level conceptual picture of what I see as an identity ecosystem. So it's a community of communities that interact in narrow but specific ways. There are identity communities, online identity communities, online services communities, common cause, that sort of thing. It's trying to bring a common concept together with the Trust Framework Committee and also the Functional Model Group, and it's just what my thoughts are. If it doesn't work for plenary, don't use it.
Well, so I didn't mean it as a criticism. Actually, I like the document a lot. I'm just interested in the relationship to the functional model work and also the relationship to what may eventually emerge as the list of things that we take a look at when we do accreditation.
Right. So I apologize. I'm being very Canadian and self-depreciating. Sorry about that. Okay. So the idea of the conceptual model as presented in the slide deck, and I welcome feedback, is that it's the highest level. So think of it as, the International Space Station level. So it's way above the plain 30,000 feet level. And it shows the nature and the shape of an identity ecosystem. There are some elemental things which, if you buy into the assumptions made, we have to figure out how they work. But it lists what the things are. Like there must be, the central concept in it is that the interaction between some sort of electronic service provider and some sort of electronic service consumer or receiver, that interaction is the central focus of everything. Identity providers, credential providers, auditors, trust frameworks, all of that is to support and enable and encourage that interaction. And unfortunately, you have to read through the slide deck because there's a build-up of concept in it. The way it relates to any of the other work is within any given online community or identity solution or trust framework, there's a set of transactions or interactions which that community agrees they do. And they have certain functions, probably an identity proofing function of some kind, probably a authentication function of some kind, probably a credential issuance or token issuance function of some kind. And you can tell from our language that that would inform a functional model. We have actors, functions, roles that would come out of any given type of online community or trust community. So that'd be the functional model side. One of the other basic premises of the conceptual model is that each community, by their very nature, each trust framework by their very nature will decide on their own rules. And we have no say in what they decide to do. We might encourage them or suggest to them that what they're doing is not acceptable to is not compatible with the 4 principles of MSTIC. And then they can choose to do what they want with that. So you might see standards or guidance from IDSG showing either idealized or reference architectures, reference models of how other trust framework providers have organized themselves and what kinds of operating rules they have come up with. So that's tied into the standards and perhaps security as well, and trust framework model, the Trustmark model. And if we can come to a rich discussion and use a conceptual model as the center of discussion about does it look right, does it feel right, Does this look like it's something that we all think we should be striving for, like this ecosystem that's described in the pictures? It will inform the other work. So it'll help the Trustmark and Trust Framework Committee to decide what should be in a trust framework. Or like, do we build that reference model, or do we specify criteria that a community must meet in order for recognition as from IDSG? In other words, the criteria, right? Is that long-winded answer shed any light at all?
I think so, yeah. So I guess the next question is: do you have a notion of when the TFTM committee is going to recommend an approach toward establishing a trust mark, and a notion of what accreditation process might get us to that point? Is there like a notional schedule for that?
Very, very notional. So in our Stream 1 deliverables, with the idea of going to this interim state, deliverables 6 and 7 are, well, there are several deliverables listed in there that have requirements, program design, and criteria in their scope. The super optimistic is sometime in the spring, summer, but that's probably not realistic when we actually do some work estimating and scheduling. Honestly, we're getting the first things first done. And then as we have bandwidth within the committee, and hopefully we can figure out the best way to leverage the NPO for this, they'll come closer on the list of things to do. But right now they're still future items. As many have noted, there are legal elements that play strongly in that, and I'm very encouraged to see that the legal types are agitating to reform working teams. That's great. We need it for sure. So short answer, no time schedule, but if we're going to have an interim state, we probably need an interim program for trust marking in some way.
Okay, and so I guess that sort of leads into my last question. Do you feel that you have all of the liaison with other committees and all the participation that you need to get your current work items done, or is there anything you would like to solicit the membership for in terms of participation?
If any of the other committees see work on our work list that they think should be theirs, please take it. We're trying to keep the chairs of, at minimum, privacy, security, and standards and trust framework, communicating regularly on plans, schedules, what's going on, just by email, informal email. We try our best to have a loose awareness of what the other committees are doing. Some of the deliverables we have identified in our work plan are clearly not the responsibility of the Trust Framework Group, but it's similar to the coordination role that other committees have taken on. For example, the definition of an identity ecosystem framework. Well, what are the requirements for that? Well, clearly it's not the Trust Framework Group only. We have to strike some sort of joint working group from the plenary with all of the relevant points of view at the table and voicing the points of view to build that. But for now, because we know it's going to be needed, we just put it in the list. And when it comes to doing resourcing and deciding on which direction it goes, we will actively engage the plenary to look for support and more hands. But until then, I encourage everyone to look at the Trust Framework Working Plan and deliverables list. And if they sound remotely interesting, or if you have a strong opinion about how the output should look, please join.
Okay, so I'm not seeing any questions in the chat area. If somebody has a question, here we do have a question from Christopher Spottiswood, and he says, as we move toward an interim model, optimistically, how is IDESG to resist pressure from existing players, including the pilots, to soften the end state design principles?
I personally, maybe naively, I'm not very concerned about that. We have enough eyes looking at this material that hopefully we can spot something like that happening. I don't know if that's over optimistic or not. What's my defense against that happening is, at least in the Trust Framework Group, we're just posting all our work, all the drafts as they go, as many of the meeting notes as we can capture and publish. We are not trying to be transparent, but we are trying to be visible. So if anyone has the concerns about resisting the pressure from system players to influence the stringency or whatever, keep an eye on our work output. That's the only advice I've got, really.
And I suppose in answer to Christopher, it should also be noted that any work output that you produce will have to go through the Management Council and Privacy Committee review process. Yes.
Now, Bob, I would submit that by the time it gets to that point, it will not be obvious what the influences were. Right? You know how it works, right? During the development, during the debates and discussion, that is the place you can spot issues, right? Issues like this. When it gets written up and voted and goes up, it's really hard to detangle it because it's being rewritten a few times, right?
Yeah.
So please look at the work as it goes. Please join in. I mean, we need the opinions to come in because it's not settled yet.
Okay.
I see Bob Arrow typing. Is that going to be a question? I'm
sorry, say that again?
Bob Pinero's keyboard keeps going, so I'm not sure if he's typing at this or somewhere else.
Here it comes. The next steps in the conceptual model include development of narrative scenarios that describe how individuals will interact with service providers, etc. Could these also be described as use cases which form the basis for ecosystem requirements for functional components?
Absolutely yes, and absolutely not. I use the term narrative scenarios, trying to find a neutral, suggestive concepts rather than use case, which is a little bit too narrow for what I'm shooting for at the conceptual level. The narrative scenarios are tell the story of how a user or how a business or how a government would interact in the ecosystem model picture concept that we think we're going to be building or supporting or endorsing. So how would any of the actors that you would eventually see in a use case encounter and experience and benefit from this ecosystem? Tell the story. Very powerful. If you can't envision how you would move through the system, it's going to be a system, it's going to be very hard to do anything. Once we get those narratives into reasonable shape, then use cases, functions, standards, criteria that relate to that narrative, it makes it easier because you have a human story to tell about it. And it's not just about the people, it's also about the organizations and entities that are in this ecosystem. So that's what I'm trying to get at. But I deliberately did not use use case or business scenario because they're overloaded and too suggestive of a particular path.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I don't see any other questions, so I think we will move on to the next presentation. And the next presentation is the use case ad hoc working group, and this is actually, I think, more of a solicitation than an update. Kathy Tilton, are you in the audio channel?
I am.
And I can hear you. Take it away.
Okay. Well, from the Standards Coordination Committee, the main thing we wanted to talk about at this plenary is kind of an update on where we are with the use cases, and that is that we have the ad hoc group has reviewed a number of submitted use cases and has moved them from the working draft to the committee draft stage. Next slide. So just this week, we have sent a notice out to the committee chairs announcing that we have that 10 use cases have gone through the ad hoc group review process and are now ready for committee review. These are all listed on the use case wiki page, and so I don't have a copy of that, but if you go out there, you'll see that in response to the last workshop, all of the use cases have status indicators on them, and you can see which ones are ready for committee review, and those are listed as the top 10. So although we have, anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. What we are looking for is for the committees, as well as any other members or stakeholders, to review and comment on the use cases. You do that also via the wiki. Next page. So you do that using the comment button at the top of the page. Once you've selected that use case, you can add comments or whatever discussions you have. And then the next step, per the defined life cycle, is that the Standards Committee, probably through the ad hoc group, but will work with the use case contributors to review and resolve the comments that we receive. It's not to say that we will accept all comments and implement all comments, but you can be assured that every comment will be discussed and resolved and disposed of such that the resulting use case will be ready for Standards Committee compilation into the set of use cases that go forward to the plenary for IDSG approval. Next. So we're giving 45 days for the committees and stakeholders to provide comments. Certainly we will love to have comments before then, but we realize that all the committees have their own workload that they're doing. They're not completely focused on looking at use cases. And so we wanted to allow enough time for them to do an adequate review, but also working backwards from the January plenary date, where we would like to have the compiled set ready for approval. We feel like we do need to have the comments by November 30th in order to achieve that goal. Next. And just to point out that although we have 10 that are indicated as ready for committee review now, we're continuing to review additional use cases. And so, when you go out to the wiki, say 2 weeks from now, you might see an 11th one that's moved into the ready for committee to review stage. And so this is going to be an ongoing process. What we'll wind up doing is, at some point we'll be cutting off, what actually makes it into the deliverable that goes forward for approval. But, we're just trying to continue the process and, get as much content in the document as possible. But we want that content to be fully reviewed and really ready for consideration. Yeah. So I think that's mostly it. Is there another slide, or was that it?
I believe that's your last slide, Kathy. And just to make it explicit, your you're asking people to participate in the review and do that relatively soon, given that there's a 45-day window.
That's right. Just some final comments. The ad hoc group, as the others have mentioned, on these cross steering group activities is open to everyone. We particularly have been wanting to ensure that we had representation from the other committees. There is a listserv you can join if you're interested in the use case work. There's a File Depot folder, and of course there's the wiki. The ad hoc group meets on Wednesdays from 4 to 5 p.m. It's on the calendar. I see a question from Bob.
Yes, I'll read it just so that the audio recording has the question recorded. So Bob Pinero asks, can you describe what you believe is the purpose of the use cases? Do they drive the definition of the functional model or the requirements for the identity ecosystem or something else?
Okay, that's a great question. I'm looking right now actually at a slide from the workshop that we put up, and I don't have this in the deck, but I'll just read it to you. The purpose of the use cases are they form the basis for the development of other work products in the IDESG, that they provide the context within which those work products are being developed. It's a method of eliciting requirements, helps us to define the problem we're trying to solve, also helps to determine commonalities so we were able to design the services, and generally guides our collective efforts by keeping us aligned. So when we look at things like taxonomy, we look at functional model, we look at some of the other efforts that are going on, yes, they are meant to inform those efforts, and all those efforts, as you know, are going on in parallel, and so that calls for the level of coordination that we're trying to achieve, for example, with the joint committee that Andrew was talking about earlier.
Okay. Thanks very much, Kathy. I see no other questions and no one typing.
I did have just one other thing I wanted to say regarding the SEC in general, and that is, as Adam pointed out, we did spend a couple weeks going through the glossary version 1.0, and it was our responsibility to, as a committee, to approve that, to send it forward for the formal approval process, and so we did do that recently. And our next steps are that we really want to focus on the standards adoption process, and we've recently stood up a standards wiki ad hoc group to put together the wiki pages for the standards adoption, and Bev Corwin is leading that group, and so if you're interested in that activity, please let me or Bev know. We'd love to have you participate.
Okay. So thanks very much, Kathy. Next up, we have Jim Williams giving an update on the policy committee. There are no slides for this presentation. Jim, are you in the audio portion of the conference?
Yes, Bob, I am.
And I can hear you. Take it away.
And I'm here today speaking for Dan Chenuk. Good day, everyone. And just want to give you a very brief update on the Policy Coordinating Committee. In response to a task given to us, we have been meeting with several large organizations to ask them the question, are there policy incentives that if the IDSG were working on those that might cause you to join? Asking those of organizations that are not currently participating in the IDSG. And I really don't have a report out today because this is a work in progress. We have met with several organizations, companies. We have some to go. In general, I think we've gotten some good feedback, not totally unexpected. I think some of the things that Andrew mentioned earlier around incentives, looking at things like liability protection, a business model, things like that are some of the things we're hearing, but we don't want to report out until we're complete. We expect to do that by the time of the next plenary, which would be reporting our findings and working recommendations first through our committee and then moving up. And again, I think what we're hearing is recommendations about what would be the type of policy incentives that would cause these companies that are not currently engaged to then engage. And some of the things, just as a quick example, some of the actions might pertain to actions by government. For example, under the President's Cybersecurity Executive Order, NIST is also producing the cybersecurity framework and incentives. And under that, people are looking for liability protection, which probably ends up coming out of an act of Congress and signed by the President. But also looking at things from a business model standpoint, for this to be relevant to some of these larger companies, they have to see that this is going to result in something that frankly fits into their business model. Will they make money? So we have a ways to go. This is, as I said, a work in progress, but we hope to, as Dan wanted me to say, by the next plenary, be able to more fully brief out on the results of this. That's it. Thanks. I'll go back on mute.
Thanks, Jim. Have we lost Bob?
Oh, sorry. That was a mute button error. So thanks very much, Jim. I saw no questions for Jim. So next up, we have Don Tebow with the International Coordination Committee update. Don, are you on the line? Don, you may be on mute also.
And now I'm off mute.
And I can hear you. Take it away.
I wanted to give a brief report on the progress of the International Coordinating Committee. First and foremost, we wanted to welcome our newly elected Vice Chairman, Colin Wallace. Colin's willingness to contribute underscores a unique asset of this committee, and that is it's a diverse and strong international representation and membership. The membership, I think, will be an important part of reaching our committee's goals, which simply put is to be connectors and coordinators of a global conversation with our counterparts in other NSTIC-like efforts worldwide. The goal of the committee is to inform these international Internet identity initiatives of the IDSG's activities, and in return to help the IDSG be informed by related activities occurring around the world. One of the things that we have as our first objective is to leverage the increasing number of events and conferences that are taking up the business, legal, and technical issues around Internet identity, and to use those events to share the IDSG's plans and priorities. Earlier this year, we built an inventory of NSTIC-like initiatives. So we'll use that that set of programs and contacts to help better coordinate what the IDSG is doing with those efforts. And looking inward, we will be coordinating with the Communications Committee to develop a relevant subset type presentation that helps all the committee members clearly and consistently tell the IDESG story to our international peers. The other key thing that I wanted to share with the plenary was that we have a near-term focus on facilitating the awareness and sharing of concrete near-term contributions that we think are relevant not only to the IDSG's efforts, but also to our counterparts around the globe. Two examples of that is highlighting some of the work and some of the architecture that was shared earlier in this week around the FCCX initiative. That notion of a broker or a hub or an exchange architecture is something that is part of a worldwide movement towards these new models of helping facilitate both consumers, identity providers, and relying parties have a better view of transactions for Internet identity systems. So whether it's the F6 initiative in the US or the Identity Assurance Initiative in the UK, this common architecture, I think, can be informed by some of the work like that of the OASIS Trust Elevation Technical Committee, who's beginning to share an analysis that they've been building over the last 2 years to look at the technologies and the tools and the techniques that provides a basis for standards on how to move from one low level of assurance, say at enrollment, to a higher levels of assurance, and thus enable higher value transactions between citizens and their government. So by focusing on efforts like the OASIS Trust Elevation work and highlighting other efforts like in the private sector, like the recently completed Forrester study called Biodiversity and Identity Ecosystems, How Individual Businesses and Governments Interact, a paper that Eve Mailer just completed. We think that sharing and bringing some conversation to the work of the OASIS TC or the work in companies like Forrester and Gartner can help, again, our goal, which is to inform the IDSG and to also bring to international communities of interest some of these common trends, common research, and common activities that will help interoperability on a global basis. So in summary, what we want to do is, as a committee, is to leverage our committee's awareness of events, of standards development, of research on a global scale, and to, again, be connectors and coordinators of that conversation. We think by doing that, we can help materially help realize the NSTIC goals and also help provide the kind of forward momentum and traction for the IDSG and its mission. Lastly, as others have, if you're interested in these issues, this is a great time to join the IDSG International Coordination Committee, and you are most welcome. And Bob, I'll turn it back to you.
Thanks very much, Don. So anybody who wants to ask Don a question should type it into the chat or raise your little blue man's hand. I'll wait for a minute or two to see if anyone has any questions.
I always like the Blue Man Group.
Exactly. I see Andrew typing something. We'll see whether that turns into a question. So while we're waiting for that to hit the chat window, the next presentation after Don's will be Tom Sullivan from the Healthcare Committee. Tom, are you on the line?
I think I am. Can you hear me so you can sort of verify that?
I think you are too.
Okay, two things adds up.
So Andrew has posted a suggestion, says it would be helpful for awareness of a consolidated list of upcoming events that IDESG and NSTIC are presenting at would be helpful. Don, do you maintain a list of such events? And if so, would it be possible to pass them to Kay or Laura to post on the IDESG site?
I don't know that we'll be maintaining it, but we certainly will be using community resources like the schedule built by ID Commons and trying to provide that resource in IDSG specifics so that they can incorporate that list, and then we can reference each other back and forth. So we want to use existing community assets like the ID Commons and others to, again, promote awareness of not only the work of the International Committee, but the IDSG at large.
So I think that's a good suggestion. So Kay, maybe we could investigate linking from our calendar page to the ID Commons calendar, so that shared awareness starts to develop. So with that, let's thank Don for his update and move on to the Healthcare Committee update. Tom Sullivan will be giving us that. Tom, take it away.
Thank you, Bob. Sorry I don't have any slides, and apologize for missing the chair's wrap-up call last night. The first thing I have to say is I want to thank publicly the American Medical Association for offering us their conference room. They're right down near the Capitol, several hundred yards away, and one of the reasons I wanted to get out of there right after the finish of the meeting was because I said we were at a crime scene of what went on in the last 3 weeks. The criminals were all on the top of Capitol Hill as far as I was concerned, so I wanted to get out of town and back up to Rockville. But sort of one of the main things I want to say, it was so good that 2 of our members were back to work, and I'll particularly give a shout out to Jim Shear and Debbie Bucci. And many of you know Jim works in the National Program Office, and Debbie Bucci works for the Office of the National Coordinator, and their presence in our Healthcare Committee is absolutely crucial for us to make progress, because their absence, especially someone from the Office of the National Coordinator over the last 3 weeks, I think really slowed us down, and we just didn't accomplish the kind of progress that we would like. Part of what I have to say is that I was thinking about what happens when we become a 501c3, whether or not we'll still have the ability to call on the expertise of some of these people in the in the government offices, especially ONC or maybe the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid. I wonder about what our change in status will do to that. As I said, they are so crucial for us in the healthcare industry to have them involved. Now, as I sort of summarize a little bit, I'm going to tell you mostly what we discussed, but I'm going to add a few comments that, thinking about doing this presentation yesterday afternoon and last night, I had a few additional thoughts about what was discussed. And I also see in the registry here that there are 3 people who are online, so I welcome them to type in comments if I miss anything or if they need to add corrections. Let's see, I see Mike McGrath and Jim Craig and Bill Braithwaite, who are all active members of our community, so I welcome you to type in comments. We started out, I was just filling in the rest of the committee on some of the things that happened on day one, like, I sent them all slides of the strategic mission and vision and that discussion, tried to summarize that, and also summarize the presentation that Doug Blair gave about F6, even though Clayton Bunnell had given us a brief introduction to that a month or so ago. And we particularly focused on exactly what's going to happen since the VA and VA healthcare is part of this initial F6 program, exactly what that means. It was helpful the other day for Doug to explain that they're just exchanging identities, as he said, interoperable credentials. And the actual transmission and exchange of protected health information is a different story, in that the Postal Service isn't technically involved in that. We had a number of people who discussed that in some of the health information exchanges, not to be confused with health insurance exchanges, a whole different story, but the health information exchanges that are going on around in different states. Just being able to verify credentials will also add some attributes and properties that may or may not let you exchange the protected health information. So that might be confusing to some people, but that's part of the discussion that went on yesterday. I also mentioned Doug's comment that, you know, this program is restricted to exchanges between and among federal agencies, and that if the Postal Service is going to be allowed to help the private sector in this interoperable credential business, that they're going to need some legislative relief. So I didn't hesitate, especially since we were right in the American Medical Association Washington office, to say that there were some experts whose whole job surrounds legislative advocacy. And I know I've said this before, but everyone on the phone who's associated with advocacy should be thinking about helping the Postal Service get the kind of legislative freedom that they need to help the private sector. And we're very high on that and enthusiastic, because we think that'll help the healthcare industry and many other industries. One little glitch that we didn't discuss significantly at the meeting, but I noticed 2 days ago there was a press release from an investigative report about the VA and healthcare and identities. And we're hoping that the Postal Service will be able to address some of this. But the report that was done by a Pittsburgh newspaper said that, you know, VA healthcare and VA employees are among the most significant examples of identity theft and identity fraud in the country, and that they even enumerated 550 employees who have committed identity fraud in terms of protected health information, and about 100,000 veterans whose records were exposed inappropriately. So again, this report just appeared a couple of days ago, but I think it has significant implications. And again, we're hoping that the Postal Service will be able to help mitigate or correct some of that, especially in the healthcare arena, because it's not just PHI, it's fraudulent identities. So whatever they can do, we'll be looking closely at that. There was a little reminder from one of the attorneys at the meeting that it's not just the Postal Inspection Service that does this. I had forgotten there was a 1998 federal law that also deals with identity fraud and theft. So both the FBI and the Secret Service are authorized to manage this kind of thing too. And I'd sort of forgotten, I was unaware of that. The last thing we talked about in terms of Doug Blair's presentation was the possibility that CMS, the Center for Medicare and Medicaid, might be involved in some way in this F6. And we're really enthusiastic about that possibility. So we're, since Medicare and especially Medicare is revamping their registration system for providers, not just physicians, but anybody who provides services to Medicare beneficiaries. So they're in a big way into identity, and we're hoping that the Department of Commerce and HHS can, start getting together much more and sharing credentials and moving us forward in that area. So we did talk about that. The next thing we discussed was there was a recent release of what I would call a final draft of an LOA, a level of assurance paper by Edna Boone, who I think is a contractor for the Office of the National Coordinator, and I helped make some final proofreading and edits to that final paper, but that was released at a recent conference for the National eHealth Collaborative, and we jokingly, when Edna and I were talking about this, we said this is LOA or NIST 863-2 for dummies, So it tries to simplify it in about 20 pages what goes on in whatever it is, 130 pages of that white paper. So we shared that with the rest of the members of the healthcare committee, and I think it was it's useful if people in this group are not aware of it. And I actually sent it out to our list, and if again people aren't aware of it, I can post it in the document repository.
If you can just type a link, Tom, into the chat area, I think Laura can take care of getting that into the document repository.
Okay, I'll do that after I finish. One of the things that came up, and there's a table towards the end of the paper that talks about LOA2 and the requirements for that, and it mentions, and Bill Braithwaite brought this up, it mentions crowdsourcing, which sort of refers to, if you remember at the MIT plenary, Sandy Pentland, one of the professors there who's, an expert on crowdsourcing and what it can do, especially locations, we felt that was a little too murky, and that we'd like to hear some more details on, even though I remember Sandy Pentland saying that he thought that was crowdsourcing was a more accurate, let's say, verifier of identities than most of the other things that we use conventionally. So we're kind of interested in exploring that a little bit more. Then we talked a little bit about our longstanding deliverables, the more granular LOA than just 4 categories. We have not made a lot of progress, as I've said in the past few releases, in part because one of the experts on this, Bill Braithwaite, we have a number of experts on our committee, but this is such a complex area that not everybody is able to volunteer additional details. So we're still working on the LOA granularity as one of our deliverables. The second deliverable is this cross-enterprise identities. What happens when a doctor or a patient is in 2 different health systems where they don't talk to one another? And so we've had a lot of discussion around that. And Debbie Bucci, our liaison to the Office of the National Coordinator, and one of our other members, Adrian Gropper, are working on that. Again, that was one of the things that we didn't make progress in terms of fitting it into the standards of use cases, partly because of the government shutdown. So they're going to be concentrating on this thing called the blue button pull, not push, which is a little different, which is downloading a person, a patient. I guess we have to call them consumers in the Department of Commerce discussion, but some of us call them patients, where you can download your patient summary and, as they say, view, download, and transmit. So those are our deliverables and potential use cases. I know we've used the term narrative scenarios, and we call them user stories. I'm not sure if we can fit them into the use case format, but we'll give it a try. It's a little bit of a reminder, if you know any Greek mythology, of what's called the Procrustean bed. We've got loads and loads of user stories, really detailed individuals, but whether or not they'll fit into that framework is a little difficult for us. If you don't know Procrustes, he was sitting alongside the highway inviting people to sleep overnight in his little inn, and if you didn't fit the bed, you were too short, he would stretch your legs on an iron bed, and if you were too tall, he'd amputate your legs so that you could fit into this quote framework of use cases. Anyway, aside from my little attempt at humor, there's a principle behind that. Jim Scheer said that we definitely have to work a little bit more with the TFTM committee. We agreed. We're going to try to get together. One of the things that was a casualty of this government shutdown, we were looking forward to a presentation from Inova, health system that's part of one of the pilots in Northern Virginia and the American Association of Motor Vehicle Administrators. So we're going to try to reschedule those presentations at some of our upcoming biweekly meetings. Another thing we discussed that we have not resolved, and we think it's going to be a continuing perplexing problem, involves a potential conflict with the NSTIC principles of having multiple identities. And in healthcare, we're pretty paranoid about multiple identities insofar as if you have two different identities in a health system and that does not allow the treating doctor or caregiver or provider to see all the information, it's not so difficult to conceive of being sued. And I know I've brought this up before, but I'm just telling you it's a perplexing problem when you talk about the practicalities of multiple identities, one of the NSTIC principles, in dealing with a system that is so concerned with liability and errors. We reminded people about the January plenary in Atlanta. We, again, let's see, I think that's most of our discussion. We brought up again, we're hoping that, assuming we go with the 501c3, we still have good contacts with our friends in government employ. And I think that's pretty much it. So I'd be more than happy to answer any questions.
So I'll note that you have a couple of comments here in the chat room. The first is you've been asked for links not only to the LOA white paper, but also to the VA report that you mentioned. So if you could post those into the chat room, that would be helpful.
Sure.
Bill Braithwaite agrees with Peter Brown that once we transition to the new organizational form, it's unlikely that we'll have trouble getting government employees to participate, and cites HL7 as an example of a 501c organization that has government participation. Colin Wallace notes that it may be possible for people to use multiple personas with a single identity in the context that you describe, as long as it's possible to get uniqueness when you need it. And I also had the thought while you were saying, that it was not too difficult to conceive of being sued. It's also not too difficult to conceive of dying as a result of medication problems. So there's problems on both ends of that relationship. And Bill Braithwaite also mentions that the requirement for delegation of identity and access permission was also discussed at your meeting.
Yeah, let me comment. Bill's right. Delegation of identity and access is a big deal in healthcare. Everybody thinks that the physicians are going to do all this kind of work looking up secure databases and retrieving information, when in fact, the history of how people practice and take care of patients is such that you delegate that to your staff in the office or the hospital. So that's a very big deal, and we want to be sure that we do the right thing in terms of have the ability to delegate authority. So I completely agree. I mistakenly left that out. And one of the other, let me see, points. Yeah, the risk, I misspoke when I said the risk of being sued. The real risk is the risk of patient being harmed. And as you pointed out, Bob, yeah, we don't want the patient to be harmed as a result of not having access, which is behind a different identity, to information.
Okay. I see no other comments or questions. So with that, thanks very much, Tom. The next presentation is from the Communications and Outreach Committee, Their representative, Jim Barnett, is not available at the moment to go through these slides, so I'm going to do my best based on the discussions we had at the chairs meeting yesterday. So if we could move forward in the slide. So the first thing to be said is that the strategic planning session that we had on Monday, presumably many of you have feedback on the strategic planning materials that were presented, and as Peter and our consultants noted, that's a preliminary draft, and it's assumed that your input will be used to improve it. So please do send your suggestions, comments, questions, and feedback to Jim at the address listed on this slide, jbarnett@aarp.org, and to the Communications and Outreach Committee. They will be the conduit through which these changes are made. And Jim solicits your help in organizing his work by asking you to start by identifying which items of feedback are substantive versus which are expressive. So talk about whether the concepts are wrong or whether you think the wording needs to be improved, and make that clear to the committee. Can I have the next slide, please? Jim observes that the feedback loop never closes here, and that's really true, right? The organization evolves, and our messaging will, of course, continue to evolve. On the other hand, there is a publication date, and we are going to have to start using the messaging to solicit members and to talk to organizations about funding possibilities. So for this round of feedback, in order to start moving toward a deliverable, Jim is asking that the committee receive input no later than Friday, November 1st. And he also asks that the discussion take place among committees. So the value proposition is, of course, for the whole organization, but each individual committee has a scope of interest, and we need to make sure that those scopes of interest are aligned with the value proposition also, and how your members view this. So it's probably a productive use of your time in a committee meeting to solicit feedback and discuss it, and also forward that from a committee chair to the Communications and Outreach Committee. And I note also, as Peter has typed into the chat window, that Peter will talk a little bit more about the specific process going forward and the schedules for the strategic planning activities in the session wrap-up that will take place shortly. I believe that is the last slide for this update, and our last update today will be from the Privacy Committee, and for that purpose, Jim Elstey, are you on the audio channel?
Good morning, Bob. I am.
Okay, so Jim, I'm going to step away for about 3 minutes. I've got one little thing that I've got to do, and I'm going to hand it off to you to give your update.
Very good. Well, thank you. Being last in the batting order and recognizing it's been a long plenary, I think everyone will appreciate brevity in my presentation this morning. So I'm going to give you a quick readout on the discussions we've had in the Privacy Committee. In the Privacy Committee, we've divided up into 4 subcommittees to address specific work areas, and those 4 subcommittees are Membership and Outreach Subcommittee, Proactive Privacy Guidance Subcommittee, Privacy Evaluation Methodology Development Subcommittee, and our Evaluation Subcommittee. So the first subcommittee report I'd like to speak to you about is our Membership and Outreach Subcommittee, which is led by Debbie Diener. And the focus of that subcommittee is not to do membership and outreach that conflicts with the broader IDESG membership and outreach, but to specifically focus on encouraging and increasing the membership and participation in the Privacy Committee. To that end, we're working in a coordinated manner with the communications group, and working to solicit participation from existing IDESG members and our colleagues in the professional community, the privacy community, as we interact with them in different settings. So one of the things that we have developed and that's available for folks to use, and would quite frankly encourage you to take a look at, is a slide deck that gives a overview of the IDESG and in particular the privacy committee and the work that we're engaged in. We posted that up to the website. It's compiled from some standard IDESG slides. I think some of Jeremy's slides are in there, but it goes specifically into what the privacy committee is doing and is useful as our members are out there talking with their colleagues to describe, what the IDESG is all about and specifically what the privacy committee is doing. So what we kind of envision is we posted this so that if your committee is out there, you want to create a specific section on your committee, you can do that and then kind of leverage the broader message on the IDESG. The other thing we have going on in the membership and outreach group is we've been engaging with the IAPP, the International Association of Privacy Professionals. They have regular KnowledgeNet presentations in various cities across the country. And would that our privacy committee have members in every city where IAPP had a KnowledgeNet, but we do not. So I'd like to make an open call to members of the IDESG who are interested in going to and presenting at an IAPP meeting in their city and specifically talking about the type of work we're doing vis-a-vis privacy. If you're interested in that, please let me or Debbie know. We'd be very pleased to have you out there speaking at the IAPP, working with their local coordinator and taking the message out there on both what the IDESG is doing, but it's specifically what we're doing on the privacy committee. So that, I think, wraps up the membership and outreach subcommittee report. The second subcommittee we have is our Proactive Privacy Guidance Subcommittee, and that's led by Jay Stanley. And the focus of the Proactive Privacy Guidance Subcommittee is specifically to take a proactive position on raising awareness on privacy issues or helping to articulate some of the privacy considerations that in general we should be aware of, because privacy is a fairly dynamic discipline. So what we've been working on in Proactive Privacy Guidance has specifically revolved around the question of the certification and accreditation process within the trust framework. So it's a particularly challenging issue to consider how you would do a certification or accreditation in privacy, because standard certification approaches where you have a specific requirement, if that requirement's met, you issue a certificate or certify that body. In privacy, it's a little harder to assume that because I say I'm doing something that I've all of a sudden, voila, I have privacy. So there's some very, I think, interesting challenges in the certification and accreditation space with regards to privacy. So Jay's group has been working on an articulation document that describes particularly how we're going to take as a basis things like the FIPS requirements and convert those into some operational principles that can be applied in a certification and accreditation scheme. Along with that, there's a particularly interesting challenge of how you take things like the risks and harms associated with privacy, breaches of privacy or otherwise violating privacy principles, and convert those into sort of an inverse operating model. So we're working very hard in terms of trying to get an articulation around that so that that can be incorporated into the work that the TIPTM group is doing. And we see this as an ongoing collaboration between the Privacy Committee and the TIPTM Committee to be able to contribute to the grander trust framework accreditation scheme that we're going to be using. Let's see, the third group is our Privacy Evaluation Methodology Development Team, and they are being led by Stuart Shapiro, who is driving additional changes, modifications, and improvements to the privacy evaluation methodology. And Stuart has laid out essentially a timetable for incorporating feedback, developing the next version or iterations of the privacy evaluation methodology. And at this point, we're at a stage where we've taken the feedback we've received since we released the privacy evaluation methodology, reviewed and discussed some more of those feedback. It's been a very, I think, iterative process, and there was some very interesting feedback that was received. That feedback at this point has all been vetted. It's been either incorporated into the planned next release of the PEM or otherwise disposed of, so that we're on what I would call the verge of releasing the next iteration of the privacy evaluation methodology. We appreciate certainly the feedback on the PEM. The PEM has been published, I believe we published last February at the plenary in Phoenix. So the methodology is out there. Certainly anyone who has any feedback for us on how we could improve our methodology, that would be greatly appreciated. Stuart and the group working on the PEM have really, I think, gotten into a fairly efficient mode of operating where they're looking at this feedback, seeing how that feedback is, improves upon or otherwise addresses issues in the PEM. And so the more the merrier. The more we have of that, the better the PEM will become, the more effective we'll become at applying the PEM. The last subcommittee we have is our evaluation subcommittee. And currently I'm leading that subcommittee. The evaluation subcommittee is specifically a function of the privacy evaluation methodology. The group is essentially our combined, what I would call the combined or contributed expertise of the privacy committee. Individuals participating in the evaluation subcommittee apply their expertise to the review process and the execution of the PEM. The evaluation subcommittee has engaged in, at this point, only a few reviews, only a few work products have been submitted to the evaluation subcommittee. So we're just getting through the first few iterations of actually applying the PEM in practice to formal deliverables. I can tell you that we are very rigorous about how we're applying the methodology. We go through the process. We're very sort of conscious that people in the deliverables that are being submitted to us are, we're part of that process that triggers the formal review and the actual movement of deliverables into the plenary for formal adoption. So we're working, very diligently to make sure that we're executing the PEM as the methodology has been described. We're currently in the middle of the review on the taxonomy material. We provided some feedback to the taxonomy group a couple of, I guess it's 2 weeks ago now, and perhaps it was last week, it's all a blur. So it's one that we have in flight currently. We certainly are trying to improve both our visibility of deliverables that are in progress as well as the feedback mechanisms so that the committees get privacy feedback early in the development process. With that, I believe that's all I have from a privacy perspective. The group has been doing a great job. We have very good attendance on our meetings, and we have our meetings on a regular basis. We were meeting twice a month. We've recently gone to a once-a-month schedule, but attendance is good. I'm especially pleased at the contribution of the members of the privacy committee, the folks that come ready to work in earnest, and they contribute, and it's a very enjoyable committee to work on because everybody's got I think a deep-seated conviction about the importance of privacy, and they're willing to engage and contribute to the process and really see the value in what the privacy committee contributes to the IDESG organization. So with that, I would be more than happy to take any questions, and thanks for the time.
So, Jim, you have a couple of questions in the chat room. The first is the Privacy Committee taking responsibility for privacy-centric and privacy-aware architectural patterns, or is that the TFTM?
So I think the word I hang up on there is responsibility. The answer, I believe, is that the responsibility resides in the TFTM. And what the Privacy Committee could do, and our responsibility should be, to contribute to the TFTM process. So what I worry about is the notion that the TFTM, the goal of developing this trust framework and accreditation model gets parted out, and then committees do work that doesn't necessarily come back together to a holistic solution. So what I would advocate for is that the TFTM retain ownership of that process, define structures that we can contribute to, and then we'll take the privacy expertise that we have on the Privacy Committee and formalize those contributions so they fit into that overarching model.
Okay, and you have two questions from Rodney Peterson, one of which has already been answered. He first notes that the IAPP Global Privacy Summit is in D.C. March 5th to 7th, and asks if there'll be a presentation there. And Peter Brown has noted that he's in discussions with Trevor Hughes about a keynote and a panel, but that's not finalized yet.
I can embellish that answer just a bit. We did put in a speaker request or what have you, submission for a speaking slot for that, and they declined that submission. So I don't know if they were more focused on, do not track, or didn't see identity and what we're doing in the ESG as a priority, but for one reason or another, they declined the speaker submission we did put in there.
Okay, so you should probably get together with Peter and go over with him what he's going to propose.
Yep.
And then Rodney also asks if you've considered some outreach in January as part of Data Privacy Day.
We could certainly capitalize on that. I'm not. My sense is that our outreach efforts should be consistent and not necessarily drive towards focus on a particular day. As a matter of fact, I would make this request, which is if you are a member of an organization that has a chief privacy officer or privacy function, take a minute to swing by and say hi to them and ask them if they'd be interested in participating in our Privacy Committee, because we have some chief privacy officers and interesting folks that they might find value in their contribution, but perhaps haven't been made aware or asked to participate.
Okay. I believe that is the extent of the questions and comments. So thanks very much, Jim. Thanks to everybody. So we are about 3 minutes away from the top of the hour. What I would like to suggest is that we take about a 10-minute break. So we'll come back a little after 5 past the top of the hour, just because we've been on the phone now for 2 hours, and I think people might need a bio break or need some more coffee. So we'll do that, and we will resume probably between 5 and 10 after the top of the hour.
Do we actually hear anything? If I put this on mute, what happens?
You're not on mute, Peter.
Okay. So how do we mute this?
I feel like I'm watching a James Bond movie.
Bob, you're connected online now. Thank you.
Thanks, Sudie. Okay, everybody, we'll get started again here in just a very short period of time. So our next session is one whose inclusion in the agenda was suggested by Judith Fleener some time ago, and it's also a normal parliamentary meeting section. So this session is for new business. We have 3 people who have contacted us in advance to put items on the agenda for this session. Anyone else who would like to raise an item after we've gone through these 3 should alert me via sending me a chat in the chat box, and I will put you on the list. So, pardon me, I've been talking too much, apparently. So I think our first speaker will be Anne Rakuya Robbins, and she's going to talk to us about the topic of user experience and its inclusion or lack thereof in our structure. So Anne, are you on the audio channel? If you are on the audio channel, you are also on mute.
Bob, this is Sudhi. I don't think Anne has called in.
But
she does have the call-in information, I think.
Okay, so Laura, can you get Anne the call-in information? Could we also get call-in information to our other 2 presenters, just in case they're not in the audio channel already? So while we're getting Anne connected up, I would encourage the rest of you to take the opportunity, if you feel like you're going to want to raise an item of new business, to send me a chat message. You can just click on my name on the right-hand, on the left-hand column of the little blue guys, and up will come a little pop-up menu, and you can select the private message facility and send me a chat. I'm not in the purple man group, I'm in the blue man group today, so I'm about 6th or 7th down in alphabetical order on the blue people list. Okay, so let's see. Laura, it looks like you've gotten the dial-in information to Anne.
Yes, I've done private chat to our speakers. Kalia is on. I don't know if you want to jump ahead to her.
I think maybe let's do that. So we'll take this out of sequence while Anne gets onto the audio line. Kalia, are you ready to do your part of the presentation? If the answer is no, that's okay. We can wait a few more minutes for Anne to get on.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Great, sure.
Okay, so let's, Kay, can we get Kalia's diversity slides up?
So I can go ahead without them coming up because they're for the later part. So this the MSTIC process has been going on, for many years. I'd say that since the MSTIC document, it's been 2 years, and IDSG has been over a year. And I think it's a really, and I've been very active since the beginning. I was at the governance workshop hosted before even the NOIs were solicited, and a privacy meeting. And in my presentation that I was invited to give, I articulated why these technologies and the personal cloud sort of model potentially for helping people to collect their own attributes was really valuable to different types of groups, which I'll get to. And last summer, Bob and I co-keynoted the Cloud Identity Summit, and the title of that talk was Identification and Social Justice. So I'd invite folks to go look at that if you're curious about why these things are important. And I've been raising the issue about diversity for a long time, and sort of waving our arms and saying we aren't excluding people is not enough, right? Because there are implicit ways that exclusion is happening, and also just that we have to figure out actually how to change the numbers and change who's showing up, because if we don't get real diverse participation, I'm very worried about the outcomes. Because the outcomes of this body will not be seen as legitimate by the diversity of people that make up America. Now, the outputs will never be 100% accepted by an entire population that's 300 million people. But if we don't make a point of making sure we're connecting to groups of people that are, say, 1 million folks, we have a problem, because that's large enough chunks of people who will say, this never included us. And even if the so-called outcomes we think we're going to generate are the same, whether those types of people show up or not, the fact that it appears that their inclusion didn't happen means that they may not accept the outcome even if it was the same. And I think the other thing is that the issue is now that we're 2 years into this community forming and it still hasn't been addressed, it means it's harder to address. It needs more energy and attention. And it needs to be taken seriously. So, and how do we do it? I think it needs to be done through real relationship building. It takes time, and it means that some people need to be on the ground going and connecting with the various types of groups that I think should be in the room. Do we have a diversity coordinating committee just like we have an international coordinating committee? I don't know. But I think it needs concrete action, and it isn't, the issue of when people raise stuff in this community is like, well, so why don't you just go do it by yourself? Or why don't you go do it? And that's not a viable option either. We need to actually have more than one person taking this on. And the other question that I have, and perhaps is, is this the NPO's responsibility? And so far, it's not really worked out that way, even though that they have 12 staff and a guy whose job it is to do community. So I wanted to just show the slides which have resources in terms of understanding what type of groups I'm talking about and where we go find them. And I think this involves going and knocking on people's doors and asking for meetings, finding out who the technical people are in those organizations, and inviting them to participate. And not just inviting them and having them come once and having them leave and go, who are those crazy people? It's like a long-term effort to change the demographics of this organization. So can you go to slide 1, please? I
think slide 1 is up.
Okay, so this is a map from Wikipedia that's ethnic groups by majority, by county across the United States. It's just to give you, or not by majority, by largest by largest ethnic group in those counties. The next slide I have is a heat map of Hispanics in the United States. The next slide is ethnic, this issue of how ethnic and racial minorities express themselves online is a big deal. The Black community in the United States in particular has a high mistrust of authority and the system. I've recently been talking to friends who are Black who are like, yeah, when we were growing up, we were told never even to write our real names on a magazine form, a magazine subscription form. Where can we find them? There's a list in Wikipedia of these groups: anti-racial organizations, cities, ethnic minorities in the United States, and groups that represent them. Next slide. Sexual minority communities. There's a ton of groups working on advocating. I specifically think that transgender people need to have a specific outreach, particularly to the Transgender Law Center. Next slide, please. Here's a list of civil liberties advocacy groups in the United States and human rights advocacy groups. I think while it's really great to have a little bit of participation from the EFF and a little bit from the ACLU, it's not broad enough. And those are the groups that always do cyber stuff. We need to go beyond the groups that do cyber stuff. Next. Religious organizations. So I've named this before, and I think people are like, what do they have to do with this? And if you look at the recent history of identity systems in the United States, particularly in school systems, the primary blocker of them being implemented has been parents suing on behalf of their children on religious objections to the system. So there's a list of the National Council of Churches, which is a good place to start for Christian groups, and we can find lists of other folks who are representing different religions. Next slide, please. Women choose to mask their gender online all the time. I think we need to involve women's groups, those addressing sort of domestic violence issues, but also just broader things, health information, right? They're much more sensitive about how they separate identities and keep them divided, and how do we support those in the system is really critical. Next. Disabled communities. So we have both disabilities that impact how people use the web, so our accessibility issues need to be in the mix, along with other forms of disabilities. So here's a list of groups that we can go and talk to about how they might get involved. Next slide, please. I didn't get to looking up children's advocacy groups, but I think we have to really get those. It's another area where we don't have much participation, just like we have the AARP, yay, old people. I think we need to address young people's needs. And finally, I put up a slide that is from an image that describes how Criterion Institute, I'm on the next slide, actually work to do systems change. And first, these are the 5 components of their model of change. I have informed a lot of my thinking on how to do work, but one is naming something. So I'm naming diversity. I laid out the starting points of a map of where to find diversity, and I'm proposing that we take seriously the art of invitation and engagement with relationships with these, this range of groups. Have a structure to invite them into, and have a plan to actually measure and track success relative to the goals we have, which is hopefully including more diversity in the conversation about this ecosystem. So that's what I have to say. I would like this to put this forward yesterday in the functional model group, and was told that it wasn't the functional models group job to address this issue, and I should take it back up. And I'm taking it back up, and I would like action. And I don't know how to. Is it a subcommittee of the management council? Is it a diversity liaison committee or whatever, like international people have? Is it an NPO staffer's job who's going to work with people who self-organize to address this issue, and there's actual metrics and tracking and movement? I don't know. There's many ways we could do it. We need to do it in some way.
So there have been a couple of comments in the chat, Kalia. So I'll give you the most...
Where is that? General chat.
Yeah, it's down at the bottom of the screen, general chat. So I'll give you the most combative first. Glenn Schoonover asks, is this really a problem? So do you want to respond?
Well, I'm curious what that means. Is this really a problem? In what sense? If we continue with the demographic makeup that we have, and we get to the end point, and then the diversity rainbow that is America barfs all over it because it's just old white guys building an identity system for them, yeah, it's a problem.
And I suppose barfing all over it might take many forms, but the most likely form, I suppose, for someone who really felt that their concerns were not addressed would be simply not to participate. I mean, not participate in the ecosystem, not in the IDESG.
Right, but you could, sure, on an individual level, but you could end up with, significant media attention that went extremely negative.
Yeah, that's another possibility.
It's not just, it's that the appearance of diversity and the actuality of diversity need to line up, or the process has no legitimacy with the diversity of people we hope to use the system.
So Peter Brown asks if there is a specific tractable issue around online trusted transactions that could be worked on that affects these groups.
So it's interesting. I think the MPO. So can you just? I mean, I'm reading Peter Brown's comment that the MPO did reach out. So I have no idea if the MPO reached out with the slide deck that I have seen the MPO reach out with at events. I'm not surprised they didn't think of it as relating to their advocacy.
Well,
it's not like.
But I think the question is in some sense also perhaps not properly formed, right? So it's not necessary for either NSTIC or IDESG to be a vehicle for their advocacy in order for them to engage and help to produce an ecosystem which they would be happy with, right? It doesn't have to be an advocacy thing. It could just be a work thing.
Right, and you're dealing with resource-constrained organizations who need to have a strong case to justify a quarter of one staff person's time engagement, and I think we could make that case.
So there have been a couple of suggestions. So Colin Wallace suggests that that concerns of people with disabilities could be in a target for the User Experience Committee. And so I think that is probably correct, but it may not go to the heart of what you're trying to say here, which is that all of these is not necessarily just that the issues should be addressed, but that the community should be addressed and involved.
Yeah. There's several paths we could go down to address it specifically, but I really want to go beyond the hand waving of like, oh, well, yeah, that's a nice issue, but we aren't actually going to make a plan, and we'll keep saying we're on excluding, which,
Understood. So what I'm trying to do is weave through the comments here and see. So you mentioned a couple of possibilities structurally for addressing this, and I'm trying to investigate that. So Kim Little suggests that she doesn't think there needs to be a separate group, and she does think that defining use cases specific to the interests of these communities is a good way to highlight issues, as Peter had suggested. Do you want to reply to that?
I don't disagree, but as far as I can tell, I don't disagree. But then there needs to be active invitation and relationships built over time. So far, I don't see it.
So I think we're probably not going to make a decision on what exactly the solution to this is structurally today. But so what I'd like to do is I'd like to put this on the agenda for the Chairs Group and for the Management Council to consider, whether this is a communications and outreach activity, whether this is an NPO staff activity, and what kind of work effort we would like to offer to these groups to participate in, whether it's use case definition or something else.
Great. Thank you.
So, Kay, could you note that we would suggest the addition of this to the next Chairs Committee and Management Committee, Management Council meeting agendas?
Sure, I'll do that.
Thank you. Next up, thank you very much, Kalia, for bringing this up. This is exactly the sort of thing that I think we should be discussing in new business. Next up, we have a presentation from Ann Rakuya-Robbins. And Ann, I believe you're on the phone now.
I am. I'm going to pick up the handset. Thank you. Well, I think we have something of a challenge, maybe even a crisis in trust. And I agree with the comments about legitimacy. And I have been talking to many groups that Kalia mentioned, and there is very, very little trust between those communities and how the IDESG, is my experience, is being structured and going forward. When I first became involved in the IDESG, I kept saying, well, where are the individuals? Where is the voice for the individuals, or the so-called users? And I kept getting directed to the User Experience Committee. And for over a year, I've been trying to understand why it's so dysfunctional and what is wrong with it, and why decisions that they don't meet. There's no transparency. There's the sense, let's go to the Communication and Outreach Committee, which is really a part of the Management Council, which I have to say, frankly, I don't have particular trust in that process because it's not transparent, and it's under the it's not really a committee of the plenary like other committees are. So I think there's a need to have what is called a locus for the voice of two things: the individuals in all their complexities and complexions, and a voice for our common human experience, our common humanity, so to speak. Without a locus for that, it will flounder. And people can come because they care about that issue, one at a time, or organizations, to devote their energy to something that they're passionate about and believe in. I think when there is that kind of structure, combined with transparency, with good governance, those people will begin to come. And I have formed a draft charter for that user committee. We'll get better words for it. User experience, I don't know. And I just to underline that, I noticed that NIST had, and there was some kind of a user-centric conference recently. Where were the users there? No user is going to pay $800 to attend the conference. Perhaps that wasn't what it was targeted at. But they're starting to brand it, and we can't even find. We're picking up the carpet everywhere. Where are the users? I say you need a locus for this voice. Once you have a locus, and I tried, how about privacy? Let's put it in privacy. How about standards? How about security? How about anywhere? And even in taxonomy, let's start, including a vibrant individual voice. Not there. So I would say we've got the user experience, but it must be real and it must be now. And I've submitted a draft charter. I'm passionate about it. I'm ready to work on it. I know some other people in these communities that will be interested in hearing us out if there is a locus for that, if it's not being driven by some kind of a communication consortium or steering group or whatever. So those are my, we have a mechanism for it right now, and I think we should invoke it, make it real, and take it forward.
Just to be clear, Anne, when you say we have a mechanism for it now, could you identify the mechanism that you're talking about?
We have a user experience committee that is in some nebulous form, but with its rules of association have articulated the need for such a thing. This terminology is in the NSTIC documents. And I agree with getting more support for, making this real, whether we have a committee or not. But I don't agree with jobbing it out to other people who will do it for us. I think this is something that, as Kalia says, we need to do with a certain amount of intimacy on the ground, understanding what the trust issues are and respecting those. And making it clear that this is not going to be, a knee-jerk kind of activity, that we're in for the long haul. We're going to form legitimate and deep relationships and listen a lot to what they have to say, and allow them to say it for themselves. They don't have to have a translator every time or someone in the middle ground. And I know, Judith, you say your draft charter. Where is your draft charter? I've given it to DASA. I've tried to stand the user committee up. I said I would, I'd be happy to lead it or not or whatever. Will you just meet? This calls the character of the IDESG at its very core into question. And how we have chairs meetings and they call the roll call. Well, Darren Call he hasn't been involved in this for 6 months, 10 months. He said he didn't want to be involved in this. Why do you keep calling his name in the chairs group? There's a kind of even farcical quality to that. And if people go along with it, it's like you allow that lack of truthfulness and transparency to grow. It's not a good idea. I accepted informally, but okay. I'm trying to read the comments.
So just to respond to one thing that you said, Anne, the process for chartering a group would start with submitting the charter to the Management Council for review, and then it would go to the plenary after it had been reviewed.
Well, I agree. And it's been in this nebulous, somebody has the charter somewhere. We can't. We're waiting for, and I kept hearing this very kind of cryptic, we're waiting for some mysterious thing to happen, and Bob knows about it, and we, what is this? What's this about? What are we waiting for? Who's controlling this? And I didn't mean to say that Daza, I submitted it to him. I just have been in conversation about it. I want this to be open and straightforward and go to the Management Council, but I must say, because of the way the Management Council is taking this communication and trying to steer it internally, I don't agree that that's a good way to do it. Whether, with all due respect, AARP is an incredible communicator, but I don't think that's the right way for the IDESG to evolve. So I'm willing to work on this. I'll go wherever this will be heard and respected, but I don't want to get this runaround anymore. Well, we're waiting for this. Well, as soon as we get incorporated, well, and now we're going to have this 501c6, which, frankly, I'm not in favor of unless we have a complementary C6 for the individuals. I mean, there's the energy to do it. I would be happy to work with anybody on it, but not to get the runaround and to be told that, so the trust in the whole process gets put in the balance. This is too important, in my view, to let that happen. I care about this. This is not, a job that I do because I care about these issues.
I think we may have someone waiting to comment in the audio channel. Is that right, Kay?
Yes, I'm not sure if they've gotten dialed in. My last message says they're standing by. Hold on just a second.
Okay. We could just ask on the audio channel. Thomas, are you there? Apparently not yet.
I'd be happy to submit the charter at the next Management Council meeting and work with anybody else that is interested and passionate about these ideas and these issues to help refine it. And
and Peter has offered in the chat room to take you through the process for group creation, which the ROA defines. So if you would get with him and go through that will be a good start. So do we have Thomas on the line yet?
Bob, this is Sudi. Not yet.
He should be on momentarily.
Okay. By the way, Anne, you've gotten quite a number of comments in the chat room, not all of which I'm going to read back. Stuart Shapiro notes that participatory design has some techniques to help with the issues. There's been a variety of chat about the process for creating groups.
There is a desire to address this issue, definitely, but without a locus, it will flounder. I just feel very strongly about that. When there's a locus, then the voice has a place to be heard and to be refined and worked on, and concrete proposals and work products and all the rest of it. Should it be in every committee that this is an important aspect? Probably, but I don't know with our structure that that's at the moment realistic. So, but without a locus, I think we're largely lost. That voice is lost.
Yeah, and I take that as your main point, that you're proposing the creation of a place where these issues can have a home.
That's correct.
So we're still waiting for Thomas. Laura, any update on Thomas's progress in getting into the audio?
Tom is on the line. Tom, go ahead. Speak up, please.
I'm on the line.
Okay, go ahead.
I had nothing to say. I just wanted to get on the audio.
Oh,
sorry.
Okay. So I've been waiting for Godot. Okay, so I think in the interest of time, we need to move on to the third item of new business. And thanks for this.
Thank you very much for hearing me out. I appreciate it very much.
Absolutely, and I'll ask you to get with Peter to go through the process with him of how a group is created. I think I'd also ask you to talk to Kalia about whether the two discussions we've had can be satisfied with one mechanism or whether they require two different mechanisms. They sounded related to me. And as usual, I'm not a fan of needless proliferation of entities. But if we need another entity, it would make me happier if we needed one rather than two.
Will do.
Thank you. So, Daza, are you on the phone? Daza, if you think you were on the phone, I can't hear you.
Bob, Daza was on the phone, but no longer. He has disconnected. I assume he only wants to be online, so he's online.
So, Daza, my impression was that you were going to speak at this time. Is that incorrect? So, being on the webinar does not give you. Okay. Yes, Daza is dialing back in. We have about 15 minutes remaining for this session. So I'll ask again, if anybody has an item that hasn't been placed on the new business agenda in advance and would like to see if you can get it into the remaining time, please do send me a chat. I will note Judith's comment in the chat room that the idea of having a group that focuses on diversity in individuals is a great idea. And she observes that in her view, the user experience group was coming at this from a different approach, and it's been on hold until the strategic planning process was done. But the strategic planning process, in her view, can proceed in parallel. So she's endorsing the proposal from Anne and I suppose also from Kalia. So we're waiting for Daza to get on the line. Any update on progress, Laura?
Not yet, Bob. He's not dialed in yet. This is Sudhi.
Okay. So, by the way, Anne and Kalia, I presume that anyone who is interested in participating in this discussion should get in touch with you via email as you go forward?
Yes, that'd be great.
So Bob, Daza is on the line. Daza, go ahead. You're on. Thank you, Daza.
Hi, Daza.
Thank you.
Go ahead, and I'm mindful that we have about 15 minutes till we have to begin the wrap-up, so do be as brief as it's possible to be.
Okay. So I've just sent in the chat, for those who can see it, a overview of this item, which is, I suppose, titled, ensuring that we preserve balance and continue to reflect the multi-stakeholder nature of the IDSG as we go forward into through our transition and re-instantiate the IDSG into these corporate entities. And specifically, this matter was one of the bits of feedback to the currently open ballot on with the articles and bylaws for the new committees, and this feedback was provided in the forum, but it hadn't really been taken before the Management Council or had an opportunity for discussion more broadly than that, and so that's why I'm bringing it up now. In particular, what I'm noting here is that we have a 501c3 top organization that seems to attempt to reflect the IDSG kind of very directly, and then we've got one subsidiary organization, which is a 501c6, and that's a trade association that exists to promote business interests. And there's good reasons for that as part of the business plan, and it serves certain purposes that the top organization cannot. However, it also introduces an imbalance, and what's missing here, in particular, I think, in view of the feedback we've just heard from Kalia and Anne, and that we've been hearing from others for some time, is the need to preserve this unique trait of the IDSG and the vision of NSTIC, that there is a multi-stakeholder process that can result in a deal, is what I'm going to call it, on the term we use is the identity ecosystem framework, the rules, the standards that by which identity can occur, such that people believe it's trustworthy, and businesses can prosper. It's efficient, resilient, and all of the traits that we ascribe to it. For that to work, we have to maintain, I believe, the balance all the way through. And I foresee, based on how things have gone so far, as has been pointed out, that the group will become further out of balance and will be less likely to achieve its mission unless we somehow balance the transition. One way to do it, I've got a proposal here, is to have a second nonprofit, basically, that is designed not as a 501c6, which is the trade association for business, but some other group, perhaps a charity or some other group, where the mission is to look after the interests of individuals, from privacy to consumer protection to their civil liberties and other interests that are called out in our stakeholder groups and in our rules of association. And that way, there's people that are interested in that who have a place where there can be some fundraising and some activity and some traction and some outreach, and people that are interested in business, and that wing of our efforts have a special focus area as well. It may be that's not the right solution. That's just one I came up with in the very short amount of time we had to react to the final proposed corporate plans. There are other ways to get at balance. We could change around the bylaws of the 501c6, for example, arguably, or we could do other things. But what I'd like to recommend is that there be some opportunity prior to incorporating the 501c6 in particular, but not slowing down the incorporation of the top group, so that we will be eligible for funding and serve those needs. But that we have some opportunity to have a discussion and to, as part of the transition plan, ensure that these open issues about participation, balance, and even other things like the dues structure, the membership agreement, the asset transfer to the extent that people have contributed IP so far, and so forth, to make sure that we've got a transition plan that's been agreed by the plenary that would include like the need to ensure that we continue balance in our next home. And so in summary, I'd like to identify through you, Bob, to the plenary that I believe that we're risking, achieving the mission of the group by subtly going out of that, not maintaining the balance, and that more attention should be paid to this, and that I would like you to assist us, Bob, in having a transition plan that ensures that there is a transition plan that can be reviewed by the plenary before it is finalized. And in that way, we can address the various issues that others have raised today and this more specific one, but not have to solve them right now. Thank you.
Thanks, Daza. So I'll note that there's been some traffic, including from me in the chat room.
Oh, sorry, I wasn't looking.
Well, the one question that I wanted to ask you was, it's not clear to me what. So you discussed the possibility of a second subsidiary. It's not clear to me what a second subsidiary would be able to do that would not be able to be done directly by the 501c3 parent organization.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So I'll tell you in particular, what it comes down to is resource allocation and emphasis. And that's real, and it's also apparent. So we've got one top group that is supposed to equally and accurately reflect the balances of the IDSG. It's the 501c3. Now we've got this additional group that is reflecting and is designed to advocate for business interests.
So I'll stop you
is now
there.
imbalanced by its nature.
Well,
is
no,
part of what I'm getting at.
But I don't think that your statement is accurate. So a 501c6 as a corporate entity, it's not like Skynet. It's not self-aware. It's run by its board of directors, who are the same management council who run the organization. And the intent of creating the 501c6 was described in the materials that were presented in the webinar, and it wasn't to reflect business interests. It was to allow the IDESG to conduct fundraising activities and possibly also work activities which wouldn't be permitted under the 501c3 structure. It's not actually clear that any such activities, at least in the short term, exist or will be necessary, so it may actually just sit around and do nothing, in which case it's not material at all. But the intent of creating the 501c6 is not, in this case, to promote business interests.
I see. Well, I guess, Bob, I respectfully have another opinion just based on a legal reading of the necessary purposes under the Internal Revenue Code for a 501c6, and then also just under the language within the bylaws and the articles. But I think we need to not kind of parse out specifically that answer right now, but what I would ask is that there be an opportunity for these types of questions, and then more importantly, the broader question of how are we going to set up these corporations so that there is balance and that there is participation and that we do adequately reflect the intention of the mission and the purpose of the group going forward. And, if it turns out your reading is correct and mine is incorrect, I think that through that process, I will say that you're correct. And but right now we don't actually have any such process, and that's missing. So I'd like to recommend that there be an acknowledgement that there will be a transition plan that includes, how and when there'll be an asset transfer, a membership agreement, and other key aspects of transition that the plenary will have an opportunity to look at and agree to, and that in that process we can ensure that we're doing our due diligence along the lines of the conversation you and I are having now, Bob.
So there'll be some discussion of that in the wrap-up. I'll note that you've received a number of replies in the chat, of which the transcript will be published shortly, and I think Peter Brown at this point has asked to speak. Peter.
Hi, Bob. Can you hear me?
No, I can't hear you at all, Peter. Sorry, that was a joke. Yes, I can.
Thank you. It's Friday. It's been a long week. I think the top-level issue has been addressed. I think I commend Kalia's comment also for people to look at. You know, there are some clear misunderstandings about what 501c3 and C6s can and can't do, and I think she's very helpfully put a link in the room there. However, I'd just like to address a point about process here. I would state that the boat's already sailed. We started back in Phoenix, Arizona near the beginning of the year, start talking about transition and about the structure of the organization as it would go forward. We currently have an open ballot to endorse a position that the Management Council came to after considerable deliberation over several months and after having at least 2 sessions of socialization of where we were trying to go with the plenary. If I were to be a stickler for parliamentary procedure, it would be to say when a vote has been called, you no longer discuss the business that is in the middle of the vote. On just a couple of elements of procedure as well, because there's been a couple of comments made about these things haven't been properly socialized. There was a period after the first plenary in the middle of September when plenary was a little concerned about some issues not being properly addressed. Bob, I think you quite rightly and very, very openly opened a process to say, let us have comments and feedback from members. Management Council will try and address those, submit those back to the plenary before we submit anything to the vote. Let's be clear. Daza, you made a series of comments in the online forum. They were submitted after the deadline that the plenary had agreed. They were not submitted according to the process that the plenary itself had requested. Despite that, and not addressing the core concerns to keep to the high-level issues, a lot of your comments went into wordsmithing. Despite all of that, your comments were taken on board, were included in the summary presented to the Management Council, and against other people's better judgment, we took them on board. Bob, as plenary chair, replied to some of your comments and said that they weren't appropriate for the discussion. Several members of the Management Council objected to these considerations even being taken, having been submitted after the deadline. I asked the Management Council whether they wished to discuss your points, and they clearly stated they did not. The proposals put to the plenary ballot and the responses made to the comments made by plenary were adopted unanimously by the Management Council. All of that process was done openly, transparently, and consistent with the rules of association and with the operational rules of the Management Council. I therefore have a major concern that because one person hasn't felt that their point of view has been heard properly, that we are playing the same sort of games that we've been seeing on Capitol Hill for the last few months, that a concerted minority is trying to dictate the nature of the organization, the direction of the organization, because they didn't get their own way when this whole issue was deliberated on openly and transparently over now nearly 9 months. And that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
So we have reached the time of for this discussion. We're going to, so Daza's typed into the chat room that he wants to discuss the go-forward procedure between when the ballot concludes and when the new corporations are created. Peter, I think you're going to address the sequence of things that's going to take place there in your update in our next section. So if there's no objection, I'm going to adjourn the new business session, and we will move on to the wrap-up and planning for future meetings.
Well, Bob, I'd have no objection, but if I may, 10 seconds to close?
Sure.
Okay, I put some comments in the chat that I have a somewhat different view than Peter Brown. and request that you, Bob, ensure that there can be a plenary vote on the transition plan before it is finalized. And thank you.
So I'll consider that. I can't. I'm going to have to talk to Steve and others about procedural issues, and it's not clear that a transition plan is the sort of thing that we vote on yet. But I'll take the matter up. Next up is our wrap-up session, and I'm very pleased to have Jeremy Grant, the director of the NIST National Program Office, back with us following the conclusion of the federal government and all of its best friends extended vacation recently. So Jeremy, what I've asked Jeremy to do is sort of give us a view from the NPO of how things are going, and particularly what 2014 is going to look like in the NSTIC world. So, Jeremy, are you on the phone?
I am. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. So, welcome back. It's good to have you back with us, and take it away.
Thanks. It's good to be working again. My wife is glad I'm out of the house, and more importantly, it's nice to be back doing the job that we're all here to do. I am glad we were able to participate in at least 2 of the 3 days of the plenary, and obviously really wish we could have had a very different sort of plenary, but I wanted to just sort of start off by thanking everybody to point out from our perspective, the awesomeness of what happened. We had grand plans for a really great plenary at NIST, anticipating speakers from the White House and the Office of the National Coordinator for Health, IT, and others. There were some political issues that precluded this from happening. And while we're really disappointed we didn't have the opportunity to host all of you at NIST, it was really thrilling to watch the steering group quickly adapt to the circumstances. To see everybody quickly pivot this meeting to an all-virtual plenary and then see in-person sites pop up around the country for people to gather was really quite wonderful. I, on behalf of the NPO, sincerely appreciate the extraordinary efforts all of you made here to adapt in the face of what was a truly unprecedented set of conditions. And the feedback that I've gotten from many of you in the 36 or so hours that our office has been reopened has been this plenary, despite all the adversity, was a success. So to answer some of Bob's questions, where are we? Well, from the NPO side, we're obviously working to reboot the office as quickly as possible after what was a very tricky couple of weeks. The shutdown, like for most agencies and most programs, was incredibly disruptive. Particularly for us at the time when we were launching 7 new pilots and we're preparing for what we thought was going to be a very big in-person plenary at NIST that would have had a few hundred people in attendance and lots of new faces. So the outcome is different than what we were planning for, but it's still good. As many of you saw, toward the end of September, we awarded 7 new NSTIC pilots, all of which are in the process of kicking off. It is good that we're actually at work to help them with the process. Combined with the 5 pilots that we awarded a year ago, all of which are continuing into a second year of performance, we now have 12 active NSTIC pilots pursuing different approaches to advance the identity ecosystem. And actually, with the launch of the Federal Cloud Credential Exchange, or FCIX as it's known, we have a 13th pilot focused on the U.S. government. I was glad Doug Lair from the Postal Service was able to come and talk, since we certainly couldn't on Wednesday, to educate folks a little bit more about the initiative. It's going to be quite exciting to see this roll out at several agencies, including NIST, across the next few months. Shifting a bit to the evolution of the steering group, it's really thrilling to see from our perspective that it's on the verge of incorporating. This has always been, in our view, a key milestone for the group to achieve. We've been eager to see it since we first worked with all of you to help launch the Identity Ecosystem Steering Group about 14 months ago. Dating back to the issuance of the NSTIC, this organization was always envisioned as being a privately led and privately funded organization. But you'll recall initially the government thought it was important to help the group out by putting the down payment out to get it started, which we did with the award of the grant just over a year ago to Trusted Federal Systems. But the speedy transition of the organization to one that's truly self-sustaining is an important one. It's great to see things moving forward. The work Kim Little's done in leading this effort has been stellar. We've really been lucky to have her in the role. While we're not looking at a time when the initial grant expires, probably around July next year, we're also looking at ways from the MPO to be able to provide additional support to the Identity Ecosystem Steering Group once it incorporates. The reason for this is simple. We realize there's a very direct correlation between the level of resources the IDESG has and the ability to advance its work in crafting an identity ecosystem framework. And while the organization needs to at least have a core that is self-sustaining, that doesn't mean once it has that core that the government can't continue to invest in the organization and look for ways to accelerate the pace of work. I think if there's one overarching lesson that we've gotten from the pilots we launched a year ago, it's that the need for an identity ecosystem framework of standards and policies is greater than ever. The lack of one and the work that each of our pilot awardees have had to do to actually craft frameworks just to support their own pilot activities has, frankly been a significant hindrance both to some of the pilots themselves moving as quick as we would have liked to have seen and the broader acceleration of the ecosystem. So from our perspective, it really makes sense for our office to look at ways to continue to support the organization, assuming, of course, that the government can see enough commitment from the private sector participants to embrace full ownership of the steering group and move the organization forward. As background, there's some precedents here. A lot of what NIST has done from a governance perspective and a financing perspective has followed the work of the Smart Grid Interoperability Panel, which preceded NSTIC by a couple of years. The SGIP managed to incorporate getting away from a government-funded organization and essentially raise enough membership fees over the last year to keep the lights on, pay for some staff support infrastructure through membership fees. NIST then, because they saw the value of the organization, saw the commitment of the private sector to actually jump up and support it, then followed up with a supplemental grant opportunity that was eventually awarded to the new organization to support enhanced program activities within the SGIP and accelerate the pace of deliverables. So to that end, I want to share that we're contemplating the idea of awarding a supplemental grant for additional IDESG activities once it transitions to an organization that's self-sustaining. To be clear, anything that we put out would be competitive. Other organizations besides the steering group could apply, but we do think it would make a lot of sense for a new independent identity ecosystem steering group to try to at least compete for this. I think what the government's expecting to see in return for its investment is results. In simple terms, the group was established with the idea of being, part of a public-private partnership that was privately led, and government is looking, to see evidence that the private sector is in fact leading. So a key metric in that regard is seeing the organization taking steps to find a path to quickly incorporate and wean the group off of government support. When that box is checked, and it appears that it will be soon, that in turn will make it much easier to justify to Capitol Hill and others we report to that the organization is worthy of further investment beyond the dollars that we first put in. In terms of when timing could be in a new solicitation, I'd ask folks to keep in mind that our office is in a bit of a mixed-up state right now, given that we're emerging from the shutdown. But I can say in terms of what would go into it, we've been working on this for quite some time, and once we have a little more clarity on a few things around 2014, we intend to move as fast as we can. So to the extent any new organization has an interest, my advice to them would be don't dally in getting things established in terms of infrastructure and whatnot to actually be able to put in the bid for it. The broader 2014 picture in terms of what's ahead, obviously while the government's not shut down, we are coming out of we're still under a continuing resolution, which essentially means that everything that's governing our activities is governed by 2013 funding levels rather than for 2014. We're not really sure what will happen in the 2014 budget. Once again, the White House requested $24.5 million for NSTIC. Keep in mind the previous 2 years they did that as well, but both years the Senate tried to fully fund us, the House tried to give us nothing, and then they essentially met giving us about 2/3 of funding when they finally reached the budget agreement. The good news this year is that this is the first year the House didn't try to zero us out, and we're actually, so far as we can tell, fully funded in both appropriations bills. So, there are possibilities of good things happening there with funding, but there's obviously some much broader macro issues that are governing the budget issues in Washington right now that are making it a little bit difficult to predict both when there will be resolution in terms of what kind of budget and resources are available to our office to support different NSTIC activities in 2014, as well as, once we know what the number is, when do we actually get it? It's a difficult difficult thing to plan for, but we're doing the best we can in terms of trying to work up a few different scenarios. I would say for the year ahead, we're very much looking forward to the incorporation of the steering group. We do intend to do everything we can to move forward with some sort of supplemental support to the organization, and beyond that, I would say we are anticipating further support for another round of NSTIC pilots. Although what direction we head in, whether it will be exact repeat of what we did the previous year, or whether it will be something a little bit different, is still something that's being worked out, and will be a big activity for our office in the fall. So that is sort of a quick overview of things. One final note I just wanted to touch on while I have a few moments is to just say a word about the Management Council, because I know the interactions between the Management Council and the plenary have really been, especially in this organization's first year, quite interesting. I think different folks have different views in terms of what the appropriate relationship is between the two, and in some cases concerns about how the organization's working. From our perspective, the Management Council is a really interesting entity in that it's the only representative, democratically elected body that actually is comprised of members from every aspect of the organization, every different stakeholder group. You've got 16 members, plus a chairman that were all elected by the members of the plenary, specifically to take on a number of management-related duties that were specifically called out in the rules of association for this group to tackle, thus the name Management Council. And because the group was elected by the plenary, one would assume the members of the Management Council are in a position to actually reflect the will of the plenary. Indeed, if the council as a body or as individual members aren't reflecting the will of its electorate, they're nearly certain to be thrown out in the next election. We think that the rules of association put a remarkable set of checks and balances in place to address any sort of gross disconnect between the will of the plenary and the actions of the Management Council. And from our perspective, the folks who have run for and were elected to the Management Council, it's a very diverse group. They're by and large a group of individuals who are really remarkably dedicated to the success of NSTIC and the steering group. I think whether every member agrees with every decision they make or not, there really is any question that the people in the Management Council are there working with the very best of intentions. The meetings have been open. Both Peter Brown as chair and Brett McDowell before him have gone to great lengths, as much as feasible, to not only make the meetings open, post agendas in advance, but also allow for non-members to actively participate in the meetings, which is not something you'd see in every organization. So I just wanted to say, as discussions of the Management Council and as motivations come up, I've been a little personally puzzled by the view that a few have put forward that this is somehow a group that shouldn't be trusted or is working in the dark, with secret meetings or actively conspiring to work against the broader interests of the organization. It's, from my perspective, a bit of a bizarre assertion. It's been unsupported by the facts that we've seen so far, and doesn't really do much in terms of supporting those who are actually volunteering a lot of their time to serve on the Management Council. And we're not seeing it as something that's being particularly helpful to the advancement of NSTIC or the maturation of the Identity Ecosystem Steering Group. And I want to say I don't think the activities of the Management Council are always perfect, and I don't think that they're beyond being questioned. But what I would say to those who have significant concerns about the body and the way it is conducting business, the absolute best course of action is when the next round of elections come up, run for a seat on the council. If you have something that you'd like to see different, this is obviously the best way to change it. Barring that, this is the body that was elected, and I think they need to be given the benefit of the doubt on most items that they are doing their best to actually carry out the will of those in the plenary who elected them. So, just wrapping up from where we sit, the Identity Ecosystem Steering Group, from our perspective, has been a stellar example over the last year of what a public-private partnership can do to advance a national priority. The National Program Office is very committed to the model and the group's future success. We're looking forward to being a very active participant as the steering group takes the next step in its evolution. That covers the bulk of what I had to say. Let me just once again take a moment to thank each of you for your efforts over the last few weeks to make this plenary a success in what were some very uncertain times. I know this group moves a little slower than people sometimes hope to see at times, but the path we're on is one that is moving things forward, and we're really thrilled about the direction things are moving in, excited to see the organization further mature in the months ahead. So thanks for the opportunity to speak with you today.
Thanks very much, Jeremy. Our next
talk is going to come from Peter Brown, and he's going to give us an update on how we're going to go forward with strategic planning, and also address a concern that Daza raised earlier about the schedule and next steps for moving forward with incorporation. Peter, are you still on audio?
No, I'm not, Bob.
Oh, okay, that's good, because I still can't hear you. So go ahead, Peter.
Thank you. Yeah, just a little sort of word of warning. This plenary has moved very rapidly on a number of issues, so anything I say is actually me speaking in a personal capacity, because I haven't yet had an opportunity to go back to the Management Council to socialise the various issues about the next steps. But I think I've tried to capture, and we'll go through in the next slides, at least my take and understanding of where we should be going, and my suggestions to Management Council as to what the next steps could be. Don't claim it's perfect, but it's my best effort at late on a Thursday evening before presenting this morning. If we can go on to the next slide. Just a quick recap from one of the slides that was presented by our external consultants earlier in the week. We've had a tendency to be working on the issues at the left hand of the slide around actions and initiatives, whereas the exercise we are engaging in is starting to look at the overall strategic plan and messaging, starting from the right-hand side there at the top around the mission, vision, value propositions, and so on down through strategic goals and strategic objectives. And I think it's just I pulled that slide up just to give us a sort of a heads up of a reminder of where we are. If we go on to the next slide, please. So I'd start with a sort of personal plea to plenary, and I'm trying to keep this a little light-hearted with the reference to the XKCD comic here. The plea to plenary is for us to focus. We're all aware that there are a lot of people, a lot of geeks and engineers in the room who love nothing more than looking under the hood of the engine, tweaking with the engine, looking at how things are working, questioning everything, challenging everything, and in many situations it is all very healthy and positive. At the moment, my concern is that we don't concentrate enough on the what of the strategic planning and messaging, and my plea to plenary is to say, we've got a process, it may not be perfect, we brought in some external consultants to help us with that because we don't have the expertise or the time or bandwidth internally to deal with it, and what the plea is from them as much as from myself is to say we need more questioning and contribution to the what of the strategic planning work and the actual messaging being developed, and not so much on the why or the how. Next slide, please. So far, this is my take of where we've got to by the end of this week. I think we got across this idea, particularly in the discussion on Wednesday afternoon, about what I call the sort of hierarchy of messaging, and when we draft, for example, a vision statement, I understand there's a desire to make sure that every concept, every idea, every touch point is covered. But I think the message we got back from the consultants clearly was don't try to force every idea into that top-level box. But at the same time, don't lose those ideas, because I think much of the feedback we got, and we're still passing through a lot of the comments that were made, are all valuable, and we shouldn't lose them. And we need to ensure they're picked up at other and maybe more appropriate and detailed levels in the different layering of messaging that we're going to be developing, taking this forward. Where we've got to is some rough cuts of the initial vision and mission statements, and thus far we've had no pushback that we're in the right ballpark. It still needs refining, it needs polishing up, no doubt about that. But the fact that people are concerned about individual words and individual ideas caught in those basic statements indicates that it wasn't that far off base, and that we're at least in the right sort of area. On the value proposition, we didn't get to discuss that in much detail. We had a bit of a snafu in our meeting room when the microphones died, so we weren't able to discuss in detail one comment that Anne Racure-Robbins, I think, very interestingly brought up about whether we should be looking for a single value proposition or multiple ones which target particular audiences. But the conclusion in that room, and that was a mixture of about 20 people from management council and plenary members, was at least that we do definitely need a single high-level value proposition, but it must be rapidly backed up by more detailed ones addressing different constituencies. So that's a sort of a quick overview of, I think, where we are so far. So next slide, please. In terms of the next steps on here, Jim put that up in his slide earlier that Bob went through briefly. We're looking for feedback from plenary members on those top-level vision, mission, value proposition statements during the week of October 21st, and we will be looking at sort of final refinements of those top-level messaging based on that feedback during the week of November 14th, and the Communications Committee will be leading on that. Another thing that it's a suggestion from me and based on comments made by a number of other people, and that is that, you know, a lot of the committees have done some really good work also in terms of articulating how and where their activity is aligned with the overall work and the mission of IDSG. And I think this is the time where, even if there was no formal process for it, for committees and committee leaderships to start also contributing to the more detailed messaging. And I think that, like with, for example, Andrew's presentation earlier on the conceptual model, comments from Jim and others on their various other committee works, there's clearly a lot of thought being going on in various committees, and what we want to be sure is that we're capturing all of these issues in the sort of core messaging of the organization, using that sort of layered, what I call that sort of hierarchy of messages, so that we are, as we get down in details, we're actually capturing the essence of what all the work's being done. The next phase that Jim has indicated that he would like the Communications and Outreach Committee to do is to develop then the messaging and communications materials as a collaborative effort amongst the members, the volunteer members of the committee, some further work from the consultants, including some pro bono offers that they had made to help us develop further communication materials during the period of November and December. And I think, you know, that would be appropriate for reasons I'll come to again in a moment, for presentation to our January plenary. Next slide, please. So the second part of this, and then if we have some moments to comment on that or take questions on that, I'm happy to do that. But the second part that I was asked to sort of try and cover this morning was issues about incorporation and transition. Next slide, please. Now, I put this very important proviso on, you know, this is based, or what I'm putting up next is based on the assumption that the plenary endorses the recommendations regarding incorporation. We have a ballot open for 15 days. The ballot is still open, and until the results are known, nobody's going to be any wiser, me certainly no wiser than anybody else, about what's going to happen in terms of the outcome, but we will hope to have that result announced as soon as possible and distributed to members as soon as possible on Monday. So with that assumption, next slide please. This was my sort of top level attempt to, and I'm going to use a term that Jim Barnett popularized this week after his internal AARP media training, and that was to bucketize things. So what I tried to do is just cover here at a very high level the areas of work that as a management council we're going to be needing to oversee. So the first is the actual incorporation, and again based on the assumption that there is an endorsement. Detailed preparatory work has already been completed by legal counsel. We took external professional legal counsel, some specializing in incorporation of 501s, to help us guide us through that process. And she will then lead the formal process of filing at a state level and starting the paperwork with the IRS to make the case for our 501c status. The incorporation documents include, as was presented to the plenary, an initial board which, to ease the transition, would consist of those members of the current management council who are willing and able to step up to the plate and to serve on that initial board. I'm happy to say that of the 16 elected members of the Management Council, 13 have already said they are willing and able, and of the remaining 3, 2 have said they are willing but are waiting for their own internal organisation's green light before they can serve, and there is still one member we're still waiting to hear from. But broadly, we've got most, if not nearly all, of the current Management Council willing to take a second period of masochism in serving in a voluntary capacity on a new organisation's board, having served already for best part of a year on this Management Council. The additional element we would need in incorporation and required by law would be the issue of appointment of officers of the corporation who then have legal, financial and executive responsibilities, signatory authority, the need to establish bank accounts, financial control systems, all of the internal issues which we are getting some support from the Secretariat and the INSTIC NPO in terms of the details that we have to look on there. There is a second issue which I think DASA has hinted at in the actual transition. I mean, there are some transitional bumps in the road. There's transitional decision making. In my covering note to the ballot that the plenary is currently voting on, I made it very clear as requested by the Management Council that I clarify that there may be some bumps in the road in terms of the formalities of how the transition works, but the Management Council is committed to maintaining the current balance of authority and power between the plenary and Management Council. Therefore, I give you an example of why this is an issue, and think for a moment, we're creating a new corporation, we're incorporating, we're starting with an initial board of directors, but we don't have any members. So how do we get the members on board? Do we use the current membership agreement? Almost certainly. Do we need to make modifications to that? Possibly. We have to look. How do we do that? How do we engage plenary? If we don't have any members, do we still have a plenary? And I think the issue is make it as simple as possible, take on board as much as we can from our current practices and rules of association, and just make it work. So we will be looking at the process of transitioning those decision-making issues, transitioning the current membership, which will probably mean grandfathering in members, but giving them adequate notice that there may be a fee structure at some point in 2014, giving the option to reaffirm their membership, to reaffirm the IPR policy we have, and so on. There is also the transition of Secretariat support and staffing, and that's going to be no easy task. TFS have been tasked by the National Programme Office to build this vibrant organisation that will take the NSTIC further forward, and we will be transitioning out of support from direct government funding and looking to a fees-based and fees plus is the term that Kim uses to take this forward. But those are clearly issues we have to look at in terms of the Secretariat support. And then at the point where we think that the transition is operational and that there are no further issues, we then obviously need a timetable to cleanly wind up the current unincorporated entity. Kickoff, and then I think it was DASA that mentioned this yesterday, and I think quite reasonably, maybe we should be making something of the fact that we incorporate and create a new organisation. Do we relaunch the organisation? And I put out there, IDSG Incorporated is not the sexiest name in town for the sort of work we're trying to do. We had a small exercise after the very first Chicago plenary of looking at what we might call ourselves, and maybe this is the time and over the coming months that we actually want to look at the name of the organization as part of that strategic messaging exercise. And even if we have a formal incorporated name, what is the doing business as name? What is the name and the badge that we want people to be bearing with pride as we take our work forward? So, and these, again, I iterate, these are my ideas, these are things which I want to take into the Management Council at its next meeting. And then finally, and that's going to be the biggest chunk of work within the Management Council, is looking through, again, the activities, the resources, the budget, the financing and staffing, all of the operational details and issues which we need to take on. Next slide, please. So what my thoughts are is that on the previous slide I tried to identify the key areas that we need to look at. I think we probably need to rejig and relook at some of the scope of and the tasks of the various committees, subcommittees set up within the Management Council as we transition in. The business plan subcommittee, chaired by Kim, has done an amazing amount of work. I'm very grateful to her for her leadership on that and for the way that she's brought a lot of people in on board. And I think we can declare that work completed. She's done a great job. She tasked out what needed to be done. It's been done. It doesn't mean that all the issues about transition and how we move forward have been done, but I think the scope that she was given, which was to map out that path towards incorporation, that has been done. I've been in discussions with Jim Barnett and some of the members of the Communications Subcommittee about whether the Communications Committee, which has been currently covering communications and outreach, and I think as I'm speaking, saw a couple of comments earlier, and I think Judith made an interesting point there as well. On one side, I would like to see the Communications Subcommittee really concentrate on core messaging, the sort of brand development, if I can call it that, and the launch of the new corporation and its work, and really getting out there in terms of making clear what we're all about. And on the other side, which comes, I think, to Judith and many other people's point, is maybe we need to have a different Management Council subcommittee focusing on outreach and membership, so everything from taking the value propositions that we identify to identifying the target groups of people that we want to have on board the organization, getting those people on board, maintaining and serving the members. So this whole area of membership support or member services, which what a number of organizations like us would call this area of work, I think we need to get serious about what needs to be done on there. So just to wrap up on those two, so there's then Paul Laurent has been leading some work on work planning, and I think we need to do that together with sort of performance, in the sense of performance indicators against how our work is progressing against the strategic goals and the overall INSTIC objectives. And then there's going to be more of a sort of operational executive responsibilities which we've tried to take on, which involves a sort of transition of the Secretariat, Budget and Finances, Human Resources Committee, and plenary services, and all the support we provide as an organisation to making the policy side of the organisation, the plenary, able to do its work. Next slide, if there is one. I can't remember if there's a final one. Yeah, so that was just, again, back to the reference back to the January plenary. And just a thought, again, we will be looking at that. I'll be putting this forward to the Management Council. Maybe we should be using this January plenary, even if there are still some transitional issues that still need to be looked at, as a celebration of milestones achieved so far, and to take a sobering look at the strategic goals and overview of the 2014 objectives, our work plan and priority areas. So that's, I'm sorry that was quite lengthy. I hadn't planned to speak at all on this morning, but in one famous American writer's words, I'm sorry I didn't have time to write something shorter. Back to you, Bob.
Thanks very much, Peter. That was really helpful. Is Jim Barnett on the phone? He'd like to give us a very brief commercial message.
Hi, Bob. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. I just wanted to second everything that Peter said, and just thank him very much for laying all that out. Again, I just want to reemphasize the request that if people have comments about the presentation yesterday, please send them to me at my email address. I'll put it on the chat in just a moment here. It's jbarnett@aarp.org. Also, just a request to the plenary generally. A lot of our members work for some really well-known and big companies that have media relations offices. And as we look at this relaunch of IDSG, it's going to be essential that those companies that are members of IDSG are able to integrate our messages into theirs. And when we relaunch, it's going to be a wonderful opportunity for those companies to stand up and say, we're doing the right thing for America. We're helping out. We're standing by these principles, et cetera, et cetera. They don't want to see a press release from IDSG and then have to go find the person in their shop that was part of IDSG and say, why did you tell us about this? So my request to the plenary is, if you work for a company that puts out press releases in any kind of regular fashion, could you please send me your contact for your media relations person? A name, an email address, and or a phone, too, would be very, very helpful. We'd like to alert these people about what we're doing, when it's coming. This isn't coming yet, of course, but we want to be ready for that day so that they can all be prepared to back up our press release with their own that says, here's this great organization, here's what they do, and here's what they stand for. And also get you probably some kudos from your media relations department, too. So anyway, that's my commercial message, and thank you very much. Back to you, Bob.
Okay, thanks very much, Jim. And for those of you who are tempted, to kind of shake your heads and say that's not about me, it is about you. If you work in a big company, definitely do what Jim recommends. It'll be extremely helpful to us as an organization and also probably to your media relations people. So I'm aware that we're running a little behind schedule. I will ask your forbearance for a few more minutes because what Kay is going to tell us about our next meeting and about our upcoming elections is very important, and I imagine she'll be brief, and then I'll come back and say just a couple of words. So Kay, if you are unmuted, please take it away.
Thank you. Yes, I just wanted to go over very quickly so everybody can be planning for January. Our next meeting will be an in-person meeting. We are planning for the week of January 13th, and let me go to my next slide here. The plenary will begin similar to what we have done for the last couple, where we will start at 1 o'clock p.m. on Tuesday, January 14th, and we will go through and end sometime in mid-afternoon on January 16th, which is a Thursday. So the difference now is we're doing a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. The Management Council, at the moment, we have blocked off space and time to meet Monday afternoon, January 13th, and Tuesday morning, January 14th, prior to the start of the full plenary session. I just gave you that. Logistics. So Georgia Tech Research Institute has offered to sponsor and host us. So we have accepted that. And we will be meeting at their headquarters, which is about 2 miles north of the Georgia Tech campus, just to kind of give you some sense of where they're located. There's a Marriott Courtyard Hotel nearby, and there are many other hotels. And our intent is to get this posted up on the IDSG website by next week. We actually didn't want to continue to leave anything up about it because we didn't want anybody to be confused with the plenary we're currently in. So we have all that information assembled, and we will have it up next week after this one is completely closed. And there'll be more detail, and if you want to continue to watch that as we post more information about the agenda, about hotels, about the meeting site, we'll try to keep you abreast there. So thank you. On the elections, I don't have a slide for that, and let me just give you some broad strokes, and there'll be more information coming about this soon. But as you know, the current elected officers of the Management Council and of the plenary, their terms end April 15th of 2014. The way that we have set up those elections in our rules, of course, mean that we have to start those elections much sooner than that. because we have sequential elections and because we need to make sure to give everybody notice, have the ballots posted for a specific set of time, and so on. So that information will be coming to you starting in January, and the election typically starts no later than March. I have to sit and do the calculations. It's possible it will start the end of February. But so February and March, we'll be running those elections so that we have in place the Management Council and the plenary chair and vice chair positions by the April 15th end of term. Just one note, depending on the outcome of the ballot, and as we're moving forward with the intent to incorporate, currently, we are proposing that the board will also be the Management Council, since it is the most representative body and is elected by the full plenary. They will serve as board of the new corporation once that's set up. So anyone who might want to think about running should think about the fact that that might be something added on your list of responsibilities. And as Daz and many others have pointed out, we will have to begin doing the transition plan in earnest, which means we're going to have to find ways to bring in money, so there may also be membership dues. So just those things to keep in mind, but I will encourage people who really want to have a leadership role to seriously consider stepping up and running for office. The details of all of that election schedule will be coming out in the near future, but it doesn't start till after the first of the year, so you'll have lots of notice. Thanks, Bob.
Thank you very much, Kay. And so now we're coming close to the end, so I'll just make a few observations. First, there's been a lot of activity, particularly in the new business segment of the meeting today in the chat room, so I want to reassure you, as Kay has noted, or maybe Laura has noted, that the transcript of this chat will be posted on the IDESG website probably early next week. The way the chat logs are structured, it takes a little bit of work by the Secretariat to get them into a human-readable form for posting on a website, but they have no fear, they will be up there. Laura has just posted a link to the page where they will appear when they get up. So with that, I want to really thank everybody for participating in this meeting. It's, of course, been a little strenuous participating online, as it usually is. I think we do this better than many organizations, although there's still, God knows, room for improvement. I hope to see you all in person in Atlanta, and I'm assuming the fact that we've called a meeting there won't trigger a blizzard or civil unrest or a meteorite impact or something like that. So I'll see you in January. And finally, I'd like to really thank again Sudi and Kay and Laura and Bharti and Eric and others from the Secretariat. These meetings, it's hard enough to run one of these meetings when you have time to plan for it in advance. Having to completely change all of the preparations for the meeting 2 weeks before the meeting occurs and still pull it off and have participation by a lot of people. You know, there have been a few hiccups in this meeting, but generally speaking, you know, I think we have a lot to be grateful for to the Secretariat and to the staff of the Secretariat and to Sudi for doing such a good job supporting us here. So I hope all of you you know, kind of realize what an asset we've got and really take a moment to thank your contacts from the Secretariat. It's been very well done. So with that, we're about 15 minutes behind schedule, which all by itself is kind of a miracle. So thanks very much for participating. I hope you all have a pleasant weekend, and I'll see you next time or on the phone. And with that, we stand adjourned until the next meeting.